did was move it down.
Oh, okay.
By tomorrow.
Well, we'll find out.
That's nice.
Hey, Barry, I have you do that.
Okay.
Is that in the corner?
Oh, no, I don't probably.
Oh, yes.
Excuse me?
Thank you.
Yes.
Where is she?
She starts tomorrow.
Here you go, Julie. Pass it around.
She couldn't make it today because she was waiting. She had to give her employer 30 days notice, and so that took it through today.
Are you going to announce who it is?
I can, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got it down at the bottom of the agenda.
Under number 4, under office.
Why don't you under board comments after I introduce Mario, so you can let you announce who's been hired there.
Okay.
I have 101.
Okay. Oh, I need my phone.
And it looks like we need a pen.
Are we ready to get started? Why don't we take up the mask question first? Looks like nobody's wearing one. Are people comfortable not wearing masks at the meeting? I see nods. I brought one in case. If anybody's uncomfortable, we can just put them on. Nobody? Okay. Because I'd be really annoyed if I came down with COVID after all this caution we've taken, but I'm okay if you're all okay. Let me start by seeing who's on the phone. I have the board members in front of me listed. Who is on the phone that is not a board member? Nobody? Nobody's on the phone who'll want to speak to any of the cases?
This is Monica, I'm here.
That's okay.
Attorney Abel.
Good afternoon, here.
I got Ernie Abel.
David Payne, I will work with Melvin.
Okay, is it my hearing? Could the people who've spoken up, please repeat, I didn't hear.
Jeffrey Constable, Iowa Workforce Development.
Okay. Next.
I think I heard.
McDowell.
That's Ted McDowell.
And which case are you concerned here? His. Okay.
Did you get David Stein? He's on the Hoffman case. That's Iowa Workforce Development also. Ernie Abel, who is the first one on.
Okay. Is that it?
We need to do our roll.
Yeah, let's call the roll. See if we
Okay.
can.
Joan Corbin, are you on the phone?
Yes, present.
EJ Giovanetti?
Here.
Barry Lindahl?
Here.
Keith Lochtel?
Here.
Monica McHugh on the phone?
Here.
Rick Moraine, are you on the phone?
He'll come.
Rick will be joining us. Julie Pottorf?
Here.
Susan Stewart, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Julie, you have, that's 7 present. That's cool.
We're going to start off today with a Sunshine Week presentation. And I'll turn that over to Margaret.
And I'm going to turn it initially over to Keith. He prepares some information. We can pass the proclamation around if you don't want to read the whole thing.
Well, why don't you have him read it for people who are on the phone?
Okay,
You what?
go ahead and read the proclamation if you want to start.
Okay, this is signed by the governor. Whereas James Madison, the father of our federal constitution, wrote that consent of the governor requires that the people be able to arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. And whereas every citizen in our participatory democracy has an inherent right of access to government meetings and public records. And whereas an open and an accessible government is vital to establishing and maintaining the people's trust and confidence in their government and the government's ability to effectively serve its citizens. And whereas the protection of every person's right of access to public records and government meetings is a high priority of the state of Iowa and the Iowa Public Information Board. And whereas the state of Iowa and the Iowa Public Information Board are committed to openness and transparency in all aspects of government operations and seek to set a standard in this regard. And now therefore, I, Kim Reynolds, Governor of the state of Iowa, do hereby proclaim March 13 through 19, 2022 as Sunshine Week in Iowa and commemorate the anniversary of James Madison's birth. Throughout the year, our state will work to support public access to government records, increase information provided electronically, and ensure that all meetings of deliberative bodies are fully noticed and open to the public. Signed by the governor.
Just to let everybody know on, since this is Sunshine Week, just some statistics that we were able to pull together concerning the Iowa Public Information Board. As you may recall, and Susan and Kate were part of the initial group that was involved. Keith as executive director and Susan as one of the initial board members. But it was passed the House and the Senate in 2012, and at that point in time, the original board of 9 members was selected, and they started meeting, even though the board wasn't funded until fiscal year 2014, which would have been July 1st of the year 2013. They finally, there was money to go behind the statute that set it up. And that year was the year that our actual office was opened. Keith as the executive director, I was there as legal counsel, and we had a secretary. And we, in that period of time, the first order of business was to make sure that we had the equipment we needed and supplies. And I think Keith can talk a little bit about how that required begging for tables, chairs, and so forth from other agencies. As an aside, on the first floor, there used to be a little back behind a stairwell that was sort of the land of unwanted chairs. And I actually, the chair that I used for a long period of time, I found down there and brought up. So it was really, some of it was really scrounging for furniture and a place to be. We also started our website during that period of time and a case management system. So some of those little things you don't think about in starting an agency all had to be done almost immediately. Since that time, as of today, we have had 995 complaints, formal complaints filed with the board and processed. And unfortunately, we proposed a lot of legislation, and nothing at this point in time has gone through. However, we do have rules that we've been able to enact in order to be able to function and to provide and to meet our goals. But I don't know, Keith, if you wanted to add a little bit about the first year, since that was sort of your...
Yeah, Terry Brent Branstad was governor and a law school friend, and I had retired from the law firm that fall, and he called me up and says, so what are you doing now that you stay out of trouble? And I said, well, I'm playing golf or something. He said, that'll ruin you. He said, I got a place for you. He told me, son, you started that bill and you lobbied that bill, and we got that thing done. He said, why don't you become the director? And I said, this is like in December, and I said, well, there's no money till July, so whatever. He said, oh yeah, but it'll be good for your soul or something like that, you know. And so we went to work, and Bill Monroe was the director of the Newspaper Association, and Bill, first thing we did was we went around to all the groups that fought this bill for like 6 years, and we talked to their, and, you know, you go to war with them, and you're usually, you know, it's a battle among professional friends, so we got a hold of them and said, you know, when you're having a convention, we'd be happy to go at our cost, and we'd like to speak and assure them that we're not, you know, going to go out there running crazy thinking we can file claims against people and all that. In fact, we prefer that they seek help if they have a question. If we can help them, we will. And it's not going to be a gotcha agency. It's going to be a informative one and an educational one, and one time required, it will be a punitive one, but hopefully we keep that to a minimum. And so that really went over, you know, pretty well around the state to the various groups we met with, cities, counties. I can't remember. I remember some of the places, but I don't remember which group was there. But so that worked well. And probably the next best thing we did, we interviewed Margaret over where I live, and she was in Colorado. At the time, I think you still lived in Colorado.
No,
You were back.
I was Fremont County attorney at that time.
And I went to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and she was at Fort Carson, right? As a JAG officer, lawyer officer in the Army. And so I made a call out there, and he worked for a judge. And with a judge out there, I worked as a judge, substitute, I think, at one time. And so I called, I can't remember her name right offhand, but we later got together. But I called her and asked her about, you know, this is backing up the effort, and got an excellent report. She said, well, what is it that board's going to do? And I told her, she's just made for Margaret. Use her while you can. So we did. And we actually started, the first thing when we started the office was, well, we got the phone hooked up. The second thing, we made sure we were going to get paid for July. And you came in like July 20th or something like that, because you couldn't
Right.
get here sooner. And got us organized, and here we are.
And one of the things that we talked about initially was, you know, who is going to be our target, who's going to be our target audience, who's going to be reaching out, who can we help? And initially it was pretty much complaint driven. That most of the things that came into the office were complaints about a government body, and based a lot, I think, on what Keith and Bill did in terms of going around and talking to different government bodies throughout the state. As of now, about 45% of what comes into our office on a daily basis is driven by citizens. Citizens complaints, citizens asking questions, and so forth. And usually between around 17 to 20% of our contacts come from members of the media. Again, you know, wanting information or filing a complaint or having information to share with us. And about 38% of our work is begun by members of local government, where they'll call and say, I think I messed up my agenda. How do I fix that? I think, you know, we want to do this. How do we go about doing it? And we were able to, over the course of, since fall of 2013, put together a pretty good website, and a lot of those questions can be answered on our website. So a lot of what we're doing now is just also training people how to use our website and what they can find there. And as you can tell when we get to the stats part of our meeting, that's highly successful. We'll have, usually around 2,000 or more hits on our website in any given month. So, that's where we've come from and where we're going at this time. That's all I have.
Any board members want to make some comments about Sunshine Week?
I just would offer, as someone who's been in local government, I just, and having very little exposure to IPIB until more recently, I think it's a tremendous asset for local government. I think it's a great way to resolve issues between, not only educate local governments, and because so many people run for those offices not understanding the intricacies of the open meetings laws. And I think this agency has done a wonderful job in education, in stopping a lot of problems, and when the problems have arisen, a cost-effective way of resolving them. Now, having said that, not everybody walks away happy, which is probably in many circles a sign that you're doing your job. But I just think from the standpoint of, and I take my hat off to Governor Granstad and Keith and all the other folks who pioneered this, because it was a long process, but I think it certainly has paid dividends for the state at large. Thank you to all of you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Susan. I'll tell you about my experience. Where I was sitting in my office one day and I had been reading about the IPIB and I thought, well, maybe I should just express some interest in being on the board. And I happened to have Brenna Bird's email and I said, Brenna, I'd be interested in that, in this board if you are, if you're looking for members. And she followed up and the rest is history. But I come to the board from a little different perspective than a lot of you. I spent my career with Mid-American Energy Company. I made filings of confidential materials with the Iowa Utilities Board and with other utility regulatory agencies pretty much every day. So I know, and I used to have to query my people and ask them why they were holding things confidential. So I learned a lot about trade secrets and how business operates on confidentiality. Fortunately, we haven't had a whole lot of trade secret cases, and that confidentiality that makes the world tick, it remains. I also spent a lot of time with local governments. Mid-American, from time to time, would be faced with a situation where a city wanted to acquire, by condemnation, our utility facilities. And I learned how local governments can try to hide its stuff from you when when they want to do something and they really don't want you to know about it. There was one town that met under the exception for legal action being imminent for 2 years because they thought they might eventually file. So I kind of got both sides. I always feel I've had different experience than a lot of you, but I kind of saw both sides of government and withholding records and open meetings, and it's been a very interesting experience. And I guess the one thing I would leave you with, I'd like you all to think about, is the fact that when you have a complaint, you have one citizen that's mad at its government. And I think one thing the board should be doing better is trying to resolve situations before there are complaints, because I don't think at the end of the day we want citizens mad at our government. Yes, we can solve their problems, but if they don't complain in the first place, that means the laws and the government are working.
Anyone else?
Do you have anything, Julie? You were here when
Yeah.
before I was.
Yeah, I'm old. I was here. Keith was lobbying. I've lived in Iowa since I was about 5 years old, and it seems like every meeting or every other meeting, there is some small town I've never heard of, which wouldn't have thought would be possible. And I've always been impressed by the small town local officials who give their time. And on the whole, my impression is they would follow the law if they understood what they need to do. So it's been pleasant dealing with them.
Well, I should recognize you, and now I can't remember your partner's name, when putting the rules together. Like,
You don't need to do that.
I want to thank her too. Anyway, the rulemaking, the two of you were really instrumental in getting that accomplished in time to start the thing in business. And Rick Moran did a lot of volunteer kind of work too, and also worked with the Newspaper Association on getting the thing passed. So, a lot of connections.
And I just wanted to put a little bit of the current news in focus when we talk about the First Amendment. We all owe a great deal to those reporters and photojournalists, some of whom have been killed, bringing us the news from Ukraine. And while initially it looked amusing, the woman who appeared behind the person giving the news, the anchor desk with a handmade anti-war sign, she'd been detained and questioned, and she could spend up to 15 years in prison. No First Amendment there in Russia. So I think the debt we owe the journalists and the contrast in other countries where people aren't free to speak up and have no First Amendment protections should make us all the more thankful for what we do have.
I guess one other, earlier this morning, I actually was part of a group that met through a Zoom meeting with someone in the Russian government who had participated in the ACYPL program that I participated in, and sort of surreptitiously done because they're not allowed to speak over there, and it was really interesting, his analysis of how their propaganda machine has worked and how they've gotten to the point where probably, he says probably 50 to 60% of the country has no idea what's going on, and the other ones don't want to say anything because of repercussions for just doing something as simple as watching a protest or walking by somebody speaking out. So, Sunshine Week brings that all back too, in terms of how difficult it is for some nations to even let their people know. One of his examples was that they are running low on vaccinations and masks and testing kits in Russia. So 2 days ago, they just declared that there was no COVID, and because they don't have any supplies to fight it. So it's like it's done. It never happened, and life goes on. So that was really impressive to see how a nation of that many people can control the minds of the citizens.
Fear.
Right. Yeah, it is all fear-based.
Well, are we ready to get to the more mundane?
Are we going to sing happy birthday
Happy birthday.
for Sunshine Week? No?
No,
Oh, don't sing happy birthday.
No.
Not me.
I don't think so. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move.
Sorry.
Moved by Keith, seconded by Barry.
I think it was EJ.
Oh, a little ventriloquism going on. I thought it came from over there. Seconded by EJ. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Approval of the February 17th minutes. Any corrections? If not, do I have a motion? Oh, come now.
This is Monica, I'll move.
Okay. Thank you, Monica.
This is Joan, I would second.
Moved by Monica, seconded by Joan. All in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Do we have anyone who'd like to use public forum time to speak?
the time.
Ms. Johnson, this is,
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
this is Pat McDowell on the phone. Is now a good time to talk, or do I wait until my bullet later in the outline?
Why don't we wait until your case is brought up?
I have the same question.
Same thing? Okay. Comments from the board chair. We have a guest here today that I want to introduce. Bernardo Granweir, I hope I pronounced that right, has been the acting ombudsman since February 18th of this year, and he's now been appointed the ombudsman for Iowa. He has an impressive work history, including he'd been the regulatory law manager for the Utilities Board for nearly 3 years, governing a team of 12 attorneys. Talk about herding cats. It was a handful, I'm sure. And some of you may have crossed his path. I know I did. He served for 14 years as chief of staff and legal counsel for the state auditor's office, primarily Dave Blau, and spent 2 years as chair of the State Records Commission. He comes with some background in our field. He's a graduate of Drake Law School, University of Iowa. He lives in Ankeny with his wife Cecilia, daughter Ava, and a credit to his pug, Bika. I like people who include their pets in their bios. Welcome, Bernardo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's I'm just kind of getting started, getting my feet wet with this new position. I'm acting ombudsman until July 1 by kind of this operation of law, but then the confirmation process is done, so I'll be the ombudsman as of July 1. But I've already met with Margaret, and I'm excited to get started. Kind of develop this relationship. But yes, I do have a history in the records arena, both kind of in the auditor's office, where we dealt, among other things, with code compliance issues that sometimes delved into and overlapped with some of the things that now this board handles. And I have a lot of respect for this board and kind of the task that is at hand as well. So, looking forward to working with you. And by the way, Bika is Portuguese for like a little espresso, So she's that's my dog. And I'm originally from Portugal. We moved when in the mid-'70s when it was a dictatorship. It had been temporary, like for about a year. It was a communist-led coalition had basically been voted into power, and then made life a little bit tough. So obviously we have a little bit of a background from just growing up, hearing about growing up in a dictatorship, and really appreciate being in the United States. And obviously we moved when I was 2, so I'm pretty used to it now. So, it's definitely something we shouldn't take for granted, and I'm glad we don't. This body is evidence of that. So thanks for having me.
Welcome, Bernardo. We look forward to working with you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Yes, we have a new staff member coming on. I'll let Margaret tell you what she can.
Yes, Hannah Fordyce will be our new attorney to position, and starts tomorrow because her current position ends today, so she couldn't start until tomorrow. But so she couldn't be here. But you may remember her from back in 2016. She was our legal intern from the University of Iowa while she was a 3L law student, and then worked that summer as with us as a kind of what Logan's doing right now as a clerk for us. So she has some background with our office, and like to say, she was very successful as an intern, so we're very welcoming. And we had, probably 15?
Yeah, we had 19 applicants
19
for the
applications.
position.
And she also has 4 years of prior legal experience, 2 years as a law clerk for, first for 5th by the C, I think, if the Judicial District, and then for the Court of Appeals. And then she spent roughly 2 years with LSA and our 22.7 sub 5 peace officers investigating report legislation that we've been unable to get anywhere. She actually assisted me in the drafting of that. And a lot of the drafting, well, she did our drafting for us when she was with LSA. So I'm really happy that she's going to be starting.
Could you say her last name?
I think it's spelled Fordyce.
That's correct, Forsyth.
We'll look forward to meeting her at the next board meeting.
Right. Or if you stop in before then, she'll be here tomorrow.
She has a stack of files on her desk that Logan refuses to touch.
Actually, no, they're in my office. I'm going to wait till Monday to give them to her.
Okay, the next business on our agenda is an advisory opinion.
And just before I turn this over to Logan to go through this with you, this question initially was filed with us back in the fall. And at that point in time, Matt Frick had all these questions, and it had to do with, you know, what do we do as a government agent, as a government body with body cam footage? And is that part of the peace officer's investigative report? And all of this was raised post-Mitchell decision. And at that time, we said, well, we have, you know, our Klein case that was pending before the Supreme Court, and said, you know, you might want to wait and see what comes out of that decision, and then if you still have questions, please, you know, refile your advisory opinion request. He did that. He did that on January 31st. He's added a little bit more to it at that point in time. So we're bringing this to you today to really initiate sort of a talking point on what we're going to do, because we haven't really had an advisory opinion on this issue, and we haven't had much since the Klein decisions came out, or since Mitchell came out even. We haven't had a whole lot of discussion about it. So I'll turn it over to Logan, but you know, write down your questions, because I do want to have a real open discussion about this issue, because it's a pretty important one.
All right, so this is Advisory Opinion 22AO002. This is from Matt Frick on behalf of the City of Windsor Heights. This is a writing in response to a request dated January 1st, 2022. It's noted at the outset that the IPID's jurisdiction is limited to the application of Iowa Code Chapters 21, 22, and 23. The issue at hand concerns whether body camera footage is a part of a peace officer's investigative report under Iowa Code Section 22.7, subsection 5. This advisory opinion is requested due to conflicting judicial opinions in the 5th Judicial District of Iowa. In 2015, the Iowa Public Information Board issued an order for dismissal in the matter of Callie Smith and City of Nevada Police Department, complaint number 14FC0096. In this complaint, the board denied a request for body camera footage by finding that the video is part of a peace officer's investigative report, and that such reports are confidential without condition. The board based its decision in part on a 2014 5th Judicial District of Iowa decision made by Judge Robert Blink, which supported the board's decision. There is also an unpublished Iowa Court of Appeals opinion from 2011, which is Neer v. State, which held that body camera footage was a part of a peace officer's investigative report and not subject to disclosure. However, in October of 2020, Judge Paul Scott of the 5th Judicial District of Iowa issued a conflicting ruling which found that body camera footage was not exempt from disclosure under Iowa Code Section 22.7 sub 5. Specifically, Judge Scott stated that Neer was not controlling, as it was an unpublished Iowa Court of Appeals opinion. Judge Scott found in part that the plain meaning of investigative reports does not include body camera video. Judge Scott went on to state that even if body camera footage were to be considered part of a peace officer's investigative report, the Hawkeye balancing test should be applied to determine if the investigative report may still be disclosed. Most recently, as we stated, the Iowa Supreme Court in Klein versus the Iowa Public Information Board did not definitively resolve whether body camera footage is part of a peace officer's investigative report and thus exempt from disclosure. The court in Klein determined that Klein had standing to seek judicial review of an Iowa Public Information Board decision regarding whether 911 calls, body camera footage, and dash cam footage are a part of a peace officer's investigative report. These matters are currently on remand before an Iowa District Court for further determination. So the question posed is, in light of the conflicting rulings in the Fish Judicial District, is body camera footage part of a peace officer's investigative report and thus exempt from disclosure under Iowa Code Chapter 22? Under Iowa Code Section 22.7, certain public records are to remain confidential unless otherwise ordered by a court, lawful custodian of the records, or another person duly authorized to release such records. This includes Iowa Code Section 22.7, Sub 5, which states peace officers' investigative reports, privileged records, or information specified in Section 80G.2 are specific portions of electronic mail and telephone billing records of law enforcement agencies if that information is part of an ongoing investigation, except where disclosure is authorized elsewhere in this code. However, the date, time, specific location, and immediate facts and circumstances surrounding a crime or incident shall not be kept confidential under this section, except in those unusual circumstances where disclosure would plainly and seriously jeopardize an investigation or pose a clear and present danger to the safety of an individual. Specific portions of electronic mail and telephone billing records may only be kept confidential under this subsection if the length of time prescribed for commencement of prosecution or the finding of an indictment or information under the statute of limitations applicable to the crime that is under investigation has not expired. As stated before, the Iowa Public Information Board has in the past found that body camera footage is part of a peace officer's investigative report. However, the board's previous decisions were issued prior to several more recent decisions on the issue of body camera footage and investigative reports issued by Iowa courts. One such decision on investigative reports came from the Iowa Supreme Court case Mitchell v. City of Cedar Rapids. In this case, material was sought which related to an officer-involved shooting of a suspect which occurred during an altercation at a traffic stop. In its decision, the court first stated that investigative reports are to be exempt from disclosure and are to remain confidential under Iowa Code 22.75, no matter if the investigation is closed or ongoing. However, the court stated that otherwise statutorily prohibited investigative reports may still be disclosed if the prohibited materials do not satisfy the Hawkeye 3-part balancing test. Some case-specific factors should be considered when conducting this balancing test, whether the need for confidentiality is greater when reports are based on confidential informants, whether information at issue references named but innocent suspects, and whether the investigation is ongoing such that public disclosure would hinder the investigation. Due to conflicting decisions in the 5th Judicial District of Iowa, the Iowa Public Information Board is not in a position to advise on whether body camera footage is part of a peace officer's investigative report. The board does not have jurisdiction over the judicial branch or any of its employees. However, in light of the Mitchell decision, if body camera footage is found to be a part of an investigative report, the Hawkeye 3-part balancing test will be applied to the decision to determine its exemption status. And you can see below in the footnotes that 3-part balancing test. Judicial decisions, including Judge Scott's decision following the 2019 Mitchell ruling regarding the confidentiality status of investigative reports, apply the test set forth in Hawkeye. The party seeking the exemption will bear the burden of demonstrating the applicability of the exemption. It is unclear from relevant judicial decisions whether a public officer is being examined under the Hawkeye balancing test when a public official receives a records request. Therefore, the board is not able to uniformly state whether or not body camera footage is a part of a peace officer's investigative report. It is determined to be an investigative report. Hawkeye balancing test will be applied, and the case-specific factors given in Mitchell should be considered.
Board comments or questions?
We accept the recommendation.
Okay,
Second.
that time I heard it came from you. Moved by Keith, seconded by EJ to accept the advisory opinion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Did we get everybody on the phone except Rick?
I think so.
Okay. Moving to the cases involving board deliberation or action. First one is Ernie Abel from the Orispee City Council. Margaret?
Yes, this is case number 22FC0004 involving Ernie Abel and the Orispee City Council as the respondent. You will note, if you look further down in our agenda under pending complaints informational only, he does also have 2 other complaints that are have been filed with us, but only this complaint is before the board for discussion and vote today. On January 31st, he filed this formal complaint alleging that the Orissaby City Council violated Iowa Code Chapter 22. He had earlier filed the 21 FC 0119 on December 14th. That complaint was accepted by the IPIB on February 17th, and currently IPIB staff are assisting the City Council with the informal resolution process for that complaint, and that informational, we've determined that we can include the complaint, this complaint in that informal resolution process. So what I'm asking to do is to consolidate this complaint with the previously mentioned 121 FC 0119 so that we can go forward and do a informal resolution involving the matters brought forth in this complaint, in that previously accepted complaint. The other one was just filed, and it's highly likely that I'll probably be asking to consolidate that one as well in April. But it's just been filed 2 days ago.
So all you need from us today is approval of the motion to consolidate.
That's correct.
Okay, I know Mr. Abel is on the phone. It's only the motion to consolidate that's being taken up today, but did you have some comments for the board, Mr. Abel?
Yes, I do. We have received the informal resolution from your office. It was brought up on Monday in the council meetings. The council kind of thinks it's funny that all they're getting is just retraining again. We have 2 council persons that have been on our council for years. We have a mayor that's been on there for years. They have stated in the December minutes that they've had their training, they know what they're doing, but they still can't seem to follow guidance that you guys have set forth. They don't follow the training. They keep making more violations. Each meeting there's been more violations. They hired a new city clerk, which was supposed to take care of this. He lasted all of January and February. March here, I was informed that she has resigned. We're asking the board to null and void the meeting that happened in December because it was not held on the proper day that they said it was going to be held on. That's conflicting. We had citizens that didn't know what day it was going to be, Monday or Tuesday, because it said Tuesday and the 13th of December. So there were people that couldn't come and express their opinion on the votes that were happening that night. We think this is illegal, and we are asking that you make this an illegal meeting, and things should be null and void. As far as consolidating everything, I will allow you guys to do that. There's no sense in keep going through this, but the reason I keep sending in the complaints is to let you know that it's still happening. They have been told what they're doing, and what they're doing is wrong, but they won't listen. They do it their own way, and that's how they've stated it in meetings, is we're going to do this how we want to do it. They don't care what anybody else thinks. That's how they want to do it. As for training the new council persons that have come in, we had 2 that were elected that started in January. We had a 3rd one that took over for another council person that had resigned. 2 of the 3 have agreed that they need training, and actually one of them has decided to go to other councils around our area and see how their meetings are run. So she has an idea of what they should be doing, which is a very good idea. I think that's very good, and training for them people are needed. We're just asking for help to get the other ones either to resign or to go ahead and say, you know what, we should follow rules, but after they've already been trained and admitted to that, I don't think training them again is going to help. I've expressed my concerns to Brett about this and to Margaret, and this is what it's come down to. I don't I don't believe training is necessary for those. I believe that there needs to be other action taken. And I want to thank this board for not interrupting me at all, because I don't get this very often. In our council meetings, you're interrupted constantly. So thank you for not interrupting me at all today.
Thank you, Mr. Abel. The only thing we're going to take up today is the motion to consolidate. But we appreciate your comments.
All right, thank you.
Do we have a motion on the motion to consolidate?
I move to grant the motion.
Second.
Okay, moved by Barry, seconded by Keith.
That was EJ.
Boy, am I having trouble today?
We look
He's
a lot alike.
throwing his voice.
Seconded by EJ. Oh. All in favor of the motion to consolidate being granted, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion to consolidate is granted. Next item on the agenda, William Byers and the Adair City Council. We have a probable cause report.
All right, before we start on that, I have to pass out a signed copy of the informal resolution. So rather than a probable cause hearing or motion today, instead I'm going to be asking you to review and accept the informal resolution, and
Has it been signed?
it's been signed by both parties. After the probable cause
That's a
report went
surprise.
out, we got a phone
Persuasive
call
staff.
from the city council, and they indicated that if it was going to be okay for them to go ahead and rethink what's been going on and go forward with the proposed informal resolution, which had already been signed by the complainant, and they did that last night. So that's the reason why this is sent out so late, because it was just approved last night. So I'm recommending that at this point in time, we just go forward with approving the informal resolution that the parties have approved, and its terms are to be completed within 90 days. So we're not dismissing the case, we're just asking for the informal resolution so that we can go forward under this and get everything finished. Just to let you know, what happened is they had a change of officers in January, and there was some support at that point in time, but wasn't universal until the probable cause report came out last week. And I think at that point in time, they decided that they would want to cooperate and go forward with the informal resolution, and we've got the support of the mayor and some of the council members. So I think this will work out, and I'm glad that's yours to keep.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm glad that we were able to do that. But we'll still be watching, because we have 90 days until we have compliance.
Well, I must say I'm relieved. I worried about this. If their attorney was telling them that the meeting was just ministerial and they were following that advice, I don't know whether it rose to the level of a defense under Chapter 21, but I didn't feel great about proceeding against people who were relying on their attorney's advice, erroneous or not. So I'm relieved to see the informal settlement has been signed. Can we have a motion to approve the informal settlement, or are there any questions, comments?
So the recommendation now is just to accept the resolution.
Yes, the informal resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Got it this time. Moved by Barry, seconded by Keith. All in favor of accepting the informal resolution, signify by saying aye.
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 Good.
Okay. The next item on our agenda, Randy Evans and the Fayette County. Margaret?
This matter is before you as a dismissal order. Randy Evans and Fayette County is case number 22 FC 0007. This complaint was filed on February 7th, alleging that Fayette County violated the Iowa Code Chapter 22. The allegation was that on February 7th, copies of public records were requested, and that the county responded to the record request by arranging with a non-governmental entity to process and fill requests for documents belonging to Fayette County, and by allowing that non-governmental entity to charge fees for retrieval of those documents that are well in excess of what would be permissible had a county employee retrieve and copy records that belong to Fayette County. This complaint was actually filed by Mr. Evans on behalf of the Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers Local 3 Iowa, which is referred to as BAC 3 Iowa in this order. And they are a sustaining member of the Iowa Freedom of Information Council. As part of the complaint, Mr. Evans provided a copy of a record request dated December 23rd, in which BAC 3 Iowa requested the following information, quote, name of the mason contractor that will be performing on your project. Mr. Evans also provided a response dated February 4th, 2022 from the county engineer, acknowledging a call made earlier that day, inquiring on the status of his request. This response included a copy of a response made by the county engineer to BAC 3 Iowa on December 21st, 2021, in response to a request received that day. The earlier response stated, thank you for your request. I am estimating that the cost of providing information based upon reasonable and actual cost to be $125. Please forward the payment to the below address and we will process the request. If the cost is greater than the estimated cost, you will be asked to pay the difference. If the actual cost is less, then you will be refunded the difference. There was no information in the documents of correspondence that was provided that showed that.
Would somebody please put their phone on mute? We're hearing the background discussion. Go ahead.
Right. Mr. Evans stated on March 8, 2022 that BAC 3 Iowa did pay the initial estimate of $125 and is awaiting a refund for the overpayment. According to Mr. Evans, the county engineer sent an additional email on February 7th to BAC 3 Iowa modifying the fees to $58.50, the amount charged by the project manager for providing the requested information to the county so that they could release it. On March 2nd, the county attorney responded to the formal complaint. He stated that the contract executed by the county for this project was finalized in March of 2021. One of the terms of that contract was the cost to be charged to the county for professional services of Origin Design. The company awarded the contract. Answering the question for the county incurred professional fees that were charged to the county pursuant to the terms of that contract. In addition, the project had not progressed to the point where an insurance document would have been provided to the county, so the information was not readily available to the county and had to be requested from Origin Design. The county attorney noted that the county was responsible for the payment of the fee of $58.50 required in order to get that information, and that was the actual cost incurred by the county to acquire information to answer the question. The county attorney noted that prior to requesting the information from Origin Design, the county engineer and an administrative assistant searched county records to determine if they had a responsive document in the county engineer's office. Had they charged for that time, it would have been an additional $63.20, but that was not included in the fees requested. Iowa Code Section 22.2 sub 2 states, a government body shall not prevent the examination or copying of a public record by contracting with a non-government body to perform any of its duties or functions. There's nothing that prohibits the county from contracting with a non-government body such as Origin Design to maintain the records concerning the contracted building project, as long as the county does not prevent access to public records. The county did not deny the request for information, but instead took proper steps to retrieve the requested information. Iowa Code Section 22.32 says that the government body can charge fees based upon actual costs. Actual costs shall include only those expenses directly attributable to supervising the examination and of making and providing copies of public records. The fee of $58.50 is the actual cost. My recommendation at this point in time is that this complaint be dismissed as legally insufficient pursuant to Iowa code. And I know that both Mr. Evans and I think someone from Fayette County are wanting to speak on the complaint.
Okay, let's start with Randy.
Thank you, Julie.
And maybe you might want to come up a little closer so that you get
I could
picked
use
up.
my inside voice. Let me simplify this somewhat because I'm nervous as a cat about this decision. There's been a lot of attention across the state on the sort of open-ended cost of attorney fees in examining records before they're released. I worry that we're starting down a path here where we're going to get into the same kind of thing where governments, particularly where they are either uneasy about documents being provided or for whatever the purpose is, that they're going to be turning to outside vendors to handle the processing. If my friend from the Bricklayers Union is here, he follows these as the business agent. He follows these kinds of construction projects all over the state. They're looking for things like, do the contractors and subcontractors have the proper insurance? Do they have the proper permits to work in Iowa? In the years that they have been following these kinds of projects, this is the first time where they're encountering a situation where they're having to pay the fees that are being determined not by what the costs in county government are. The administrative assistant to the county engineer makes $23 an hour. Origin Design had these records retrieved and examined by a project assistant whose time is billed at $104 an hour, and by an architect whose time is billed at $130 an hour. Government can't charge for the benefits that they pay for a government employee. They can't charge for the equipment that they maintain. But in this instance, and I fear that we're going to see this going forward, in this instance, Origin Design is able to charge whatever they want as an hourly rate without regard for what the employees are actually making. They're able to add on employee benefits. They're able to add on a profit motive. And suddenly, what Jeff here got from Origin was one sheet of paper that had the name of the masonry contractor, the physical address of the subcontractor, and the city that they exist in. That was a $58 expense. The law talks about reasonable fees, and I don't know what part of $58 for one page is reasonable, but I worry that a green light on this Fayette County's handling of this is going to serve as a roadmap that government across the state can use, and we're going to be in a situation like we're dealing with where government is charging thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in the case of one school district for attorneys to review records. Anyway, I leave it in your hands. I think Jeff, when you get all finished with Fayette County, Jeff may have some comments he wants to make for you.
Well, maybe now would be the appropriate time, right after you, if you'd like to speak with the board.
Yeah, this is the very first time I've ever been charged for a FOIA request. And basically, what I use for the information is we are the lowest responsive bidder, okay? So I'm just trying to prove responsive and responsible. But for an example, and this is how critical this is. So last year, I used some of this information from another project, okay? So with this information, which I was never charged for, I went and worked on a public school, paid cash, and nobody knew my name. They knew me from Sam from Iowa. I'm working around our elementary children. They're required to do a background check. They never did. So this is how we're using this information. So I'm only trying to protect our kids, our children in schools. And the public job is lowest responsible bidder. Everybody's just taking lowest bidder. Nobody's following through to make sure everybody else is complying by our rules and laws. So if I had to pay $58.50 for every FOIA for just this simple thing, we couldn't do it. I mean, to me, to a simple email to the general contractor, and they're supposed to provide the list of subcontractors to the owner. I mean, all this information should be right there. Just a simple email, right there's the list. That's
Could you give me your name again for a minute?
Jeff Hager.
Jeff Hager. Is there anybody on the phone for the respondent? From Fayette County? No? Board questions or comments?
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I confess total confusion when I read this over the weekend, in that somewhere it indicated down in the footnote, copy of the record request requested the following information: name of the mason contractor that will be performing on your project. So that's all that was requested? I mean, that's what
Yeah.
this is all about? The name of the contractor?
The name of the subcontractor that was doing the masonry part of the job.
And the county didn't know?
That's, my understanding is the county did not know who was the subcontractor on the account, and had to seek that information from the company that was awarded the contract. Normally, I guess as they go along, there's insurance documents that have to be filled out, and this part, according to what the county said, this part had not reached that stage yet, so they didn't have any documents available. I think there's some dispute as whether they should have or not, but they didn't. And it was not a request for actually, except for the insurance document, for any actual record. It was a request for the information of who got that bid, or who is the lead subcontractor to.
Well, my takeaway on it was wanting the information name, the contractor's name.
Right.
And I couldn't understand why somebody just pick up the phone and call the contractor and ask them. I mean, I don't get the whole thing. I mean, I can see where you might want to, a whole bunch of information as part of the contract, which, they should be able to get that at the county. But kind of, I'm really just kind of thinking, I don't know what we're doing with this.
I'm kind of with Keith. I'm a little confused. I appreciate comments that you both made. I guess my question to you, Sarah, if I may, is this an unusual situation, or is this, I mean, you say it was the first time that you've ever encountered this kind of problem. So maybe I'm wondering, I don't know, I'm trying to get, is this kind of a bleed in the system? Is this unusual? Maybe it's unique to Fayette County, or is it something that goes on elsewhere? Because I certainly understand both sides of this coin. And I'm trying to ferret through it somehow or other.
Yes, so I've never been charged, so any public entity, say if I can't get the information just by stopping by the general contractor on site, that information there, it's sometimes that they won't give it. That doesn't happen very often. Then it's just a simple FOIA to the county, and we've never had to write a check out before. It's it's always been, and we could go to, I've got as much as the signed contracts with the architects. I mean, really digging in, we've never been charged for a fee, and especially just a name to get the list of all subcontractors on a job. That's just a piece of paper or a phone call, and it's an email. They already have this information. The general contractors are supposed to provide the owners within 10 days a list of their subcontractors. And especially when you're on a public job with the exempt sales tax, that block work was sitting there, all the block for their job was sitting there last December on the job. So it just, that's why I'm really arguing this fee for just a simple, like I said, a simple email to the general contractor, or like you said, a phone call. It's right there. It's not like I'm asking for, if it was certified payroll, you're talking something wholly different, totally different. But just the name of a contractor, is the only thing I'm asking for. And I really, to reaching out to Origin, I think they spent way more time on this thing, trying to justify how they come up with a fee compared to it just being one and done.
My impression is it's just, you know, is it once in a lifetime thing? Is it just, or is this, I agree with Randy. I hate to see this become precedential, but I'm not sure. That's why I asked. It happens very often. It sounds like it's the first time you've encountered it. Apparently you've been doing it for a while. So I don't know if that would dispel Mr. Evans' concern or not. Or maybe I'm missing the point here. I'm kind of like Keith. Yeah. I understand a little bit about the system too. It doesn't seem to me to be very hard to get the information. On the other hand, maybe it's somebody dropped the ball someplace and they had to go through the process to get it. I don't know. It just doesn't fit for me. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was waving goodbye to Bernardo.
No, you waved me off. Well, which happens before.
It occurred to me, you know,
Keith had a point, and then we'll get back to you, Susan.
well, I'm surprised the county would pay the project manager $58.50 for providing this information. I mean, just the whole thing just is,
None of it fits.
like we're trying to, you know, pick on somebody or something. I don't know what's going on.
Mr. Hager, have you asked for this kind of information from Fayette County before?
I
About
actually asked for a list of subcontractors, and they responded instantly with the $125. And then Randy did some.
I mean, I have had other members who have asked Fayette County for information, and they get the same kind of approach. You know, it'll cost an estimated $125. You know, so, but I have, I had correspondence last week with a different labor organization that was seeking the same kind of information out of the city of Des Moines. And the city, as kind of the form letter response said, here's the way we charge, and, we will provide you with an estimate. And almost, less than a day later, the city of Des Moines was back. Here's the information that you were seeking, and there's no charge because we have it in the computer, and it would take them longer to type up an invoice than it would be to hit the print button.
Can I add to that, since my name is Carol Moser, I'm the Deputy City Attorney in Des Moines, and I do want to just add something that's being said. In our policy, we say that if the item is able to be recovered in less than 15 minutes, there will be no charge. And I'd have to say that that's the bulk of our requests. We get a lot of requests. And I also want to indicate, and it may be self-serving for some statements I make later, but the city absolutely has attorneys reviewing documents all the time because we have to protect the privileges with our client, but we have never charged for attorney time. So just wanted to kind of clarify why, and we work very hard to turn around and get information very quickly, but the policy itself says that if it's less than 15 minutes, it's no charge.
Well, one solution might be for Fayette County to put it in their contract with the contractor that information about subcontractors of the kind Mr. Hager's requesting would be furnished on request. Did we,
This is
Susan, I meant to get
Stewart.
back.
I guess one question, this is my time to talk. I know that many government bodies utilize contractors and they charge this kind of money for different tasks they perform. I know I review school invoices, school building invoices every couple of months for a committee I'm on. And, there's virtually every government, and I expect especially the smaller ones, hire contractors or or architects or engineers to do all this work for them. So this is not like a unique problem, I wouldn't say, but Margaret, have we run into this before? Or do most governments just basically not ask their engineer who's charging loaded costs to get the information, and they just get it themselves or don't charge? I mean, this is a larger problem than just this case.
We don't get, this is kind of a unique situation, so I don't know how to answer what most governments do, because we only get involved with ones where somebody says they're doing it wrong. So we haven't had many of these. Later in today, I was going to discuss the legislation that looks like it's going to be passed that does address some of the cost situation, but all it says is reasonable costs and reasonable expenses that are of the examination and copying. And costs for legal services should be utilized for the redaction or review of legally protected confidential information. So I think the statute that's probably going to be passed probably doesn't answer any of the questions that are proposed today.
I think there is a provision in there that I don't think it requires, but I think it encourages, and I don't know how you encourage in the law, encourages governments to not charge for requests that they can fill within 30 minutes.
They have in here, it says, although fulfillment of a request for a copy of a public record may be contingent upon receipt of payment of reasonable expenses, the lawful custodian shall make every reasonable effort to provide the public record requested at no cost other than copying costs for a record which takes less than 30 minutes to produce.
Did anybody talk with Wayne Sauer?
I did, but and I thought he was going to appear today, is what I heard, the last thing I heard from him. So,
I mean, unless I'm oversimplifying.
I thought the county attorney was going to be available to answer questions. That the last discussion that I had, or the county engineer, was that somebody would be available.
It would be, I think it would be a simple matter to put in the contract, the obligation of the contractor to furnish the names of subs and the kinds of information that you have to routinely ask for.
And that is in the spec book. The contractor is supposed to provide that stuff to the owner, which would be Fayette County on this project.
And they should be able to just give it to you
Exactly,
quickly.
not only in the specs, especially Iowa public jobs, they have sales tax exemption. So they also have to give the rest of those contractors, the subcontractors that are using this. So they've got the Mason contractor's name in several different spots, and it's provided to the owner of Fayette County. So it just, to me, the information should be sitting right there in Fayette County. But
Generally, is that all the information you need, or like a list of the names of
yes, a lot of
subcontractors?
times it's the exact proper spelling of the contractor and who's awarded it, and that's how, from there, there I start looking in and doing my research off of it.
Well, rather than just dismiss it, what do people think about tabling this and requesting that Mr. Sauer be available at least by phone at the next meeting to talk about a way in which this information can be furnished in the way Mr. Hager was used to getting it.
I was thinking too about.
I would move,
Oh, Susan, Keith has a comment, and then I'll get back to you.
okay.
Oh, I was just, whether Isaac would have an idea about it. To me, this is still about just asking for the name of a contractor. I mean, if they're giving him the runaround on that, I think something ought to be done about it. I can agree with Randy on that. But is this something that, I don't know, maybe Isaac has something out on, or
Well, I
I'm
guess-
not understanding, or, what?
I can see why the county attorney is passing on costs he had to pay, but I think we need to talk to him how to avoid these things from happening in the future.
Yeah, but that's kind of the county's problem.
Well, it's kind of our problem
File
now.
and find out who their contractor is, why?
Well, I think it's worth talking to the county attorney directly. Is it still the same county attorney, Wayne Sauer? He was
Yeah.
a classmate of mine, so.
No, yeah, that's who we got communications with.
What other options do we have besides tabling it?
Accepting it or dismissing it.
What if we find the fee is unreasonable? I mean,
I don't think we have a factual basis to say it's unreasonable without getting some direct comment from the county. They're passing on the charge they got, but I don't know that they've done their best to minimize the charge.
This all goes back to how Chapter 23 is set up and what our process is by law. And we're in 23.8, which is reviewing a complaint to determine whether to accept it or dismiss it. If we accept it based on just what's there, then the next step is that we engage in an informal resolution process. So if we accept, then that's what staff would have to do. If
Barry, I don't think there's enough information to accept that there's been a violation. So I don't know that we have another alternative, but get the county attorney to talk to us directly. Because certainly there ought to be steps he can take to make sure people like Mr. Hager can get that kind of information rather simply. Susan, did I get back to you?
no,
The only point I would make is that I think schools use the same kind of consulting engineers for virtually all their work, so I guess if we're going beyond just this complaint, this is something that is used widely by all types of government bodies, so we might want to talk to the schools and see what they do as well.
I know practically nothing about construction. Mr. Hager, is it commonplace for every project like this, you would want a list of the subcontractors?
Yes, and we focus on, of course, it's public information and public entities. And the schools, we don't have any problem. I've never had any problem. There's hundreds of requests every year, just a simple list of contracts. And to me, it's like, okay, what's one name of one contractor going to cost me? Is that $100? And it was $125 too. I'm like, really?
Well, it's sounding to me like the company imposed the charge and the county attorney didn't give any pushback. He just passed the charge on. So I wouldn't call him cold right now. I'd ask him to come in and talk to us.
I think, Julie, I think you suggested the table, that it seems more sense to me.
And just let Mr. Sauer talk to us on the phone if he wants,
Yeah,
not drive here
that
for
would be
a
my
day.
suggestion. Otherwise, we're not going to get it resolved here. I don't think without any more information that we have.
I don't know that we have a violation that's clear, but I'm not real comfortable dismissing it and sticking Mr.
I
Hager
think
with that kind of bill.
dismissing it sets a bad precedent.
Yeah. So
Anybody that looks at this and thinks they can charge $125 for making a phone call?
I don't see another alternative. Anybody want to move to table this and get a
I'll
hold of
move. I'll
Mr.
move.
This is Rick. I'm finally in. Sorry.
Hi, Rick.
Hi.
Did you want to comment?
I think he just joined us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you
Well,
This is Monica. I would move that we table this until next meeting.
I'll second.
And do you want to include in that motion that we request Mr. Sauer speak with the board either in person or by phone? Monica?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes, please add that.
And you want to second it in
I'll
that fashion?
include it in my second.
Okay, then all in favor of tabling this and requesting participation by Mr. Sauer at the next meeting?
Aye.
Signify by saying
Aye.
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 So would I be able to,
Ju-
I thought you were getting votes.
I am, but
Okay.
anybody opposed? There's no opposition. Mr. Hager? That's all right.
so I sent Margaret an email by mistake the other day, I misinterpreted it, but so would I be able to get you more evidence that's in the specs? It should be in, basically it's in the contracts about the information the general contractor is to provide to Fayette County. Would that be helpful too? Would I be able to?
I don't, what he's talking about, and I actually have it, he sent screenshots of other parts of state law that talks about things that should be in a contract and should be available. Sales tax information, there were screenshots of all sorts of things.
That's
But
out
there-
of the spec, that's out of the spec book, the requirement for that Fayette County project, so
Right.
that's just specific to their own project, okay?
Right, but I'd say that it's not based on the release of records, the fact that your information shows that they weren't following their own policies or their own requirements.
The spec book, I'm with
That
you.
was kind of also provided, it's like this stuff should be, it's in the computer system or just a phone call. That's $58.50, it's just insane for a fee.
Why don't you decide if you think those would be helpful to us?
I didn't think they'd be helpful.
Well, I think the motion
not hard to read.
passed. Did we have any
It was
opposed?
unanimous.
Okay. Then the matter's tabled, and hopefully in the next meeting, we'll hear from Mr. Sauer.
Okay, and this is Susan. Since Rick joined, I am going, if you have a quorum, I'm going to leave the meeting. My sister's just got here from California, and I think I should spend some time with her.
Okay,
So if you guys have a quorum,
we do.
you don't, okay, all right, I will talk to you next month.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you guys for your time. I've got a 3-hour drive, so I'm going to get
Okay.
it
Thank you.
done. Safe.
I wasn't sure you were happy about that resolution, Barry, but I didn't know what else we could really do, but get the county.
No, I agree. I mean, we can't dismiss it.
I
The only other option is to bring it back, that's fine.
I felt bad for this guy.
Yeah.
Okay. The next item on our agenda, Brian Grassi from the City of West Liberty.
Yes, this is case number 22FC0002. Before you as a dismissal order is Brian Grassi as a complainant and the City of West Liberty as a respondent. This complaint was filed on January 12, 2022, alleging that the City of West Liberty had violated Iowa Code Chapter 22. He alleged that he filed a request for public records, and in his words, that the city replied that no information would be provided until we provide $1,000 in advance. And this is, he also alleged that the city was intercepting funds that belonged to the fire and ambulance department, and that issue is beyond the jurisdiction of the IPIB. He requested the city's financial records for the calendar year 2021. Copies of emails that were provided indicated that bank records would be requested from the bank and copied for Mr. Grassi. The bank charge is $230 for researching and compiling the requested records. On January 31st, 2022, the city clerk responded to the complaint and stated that all electronic copies were ready for Mr. Grassi. They needed a response from him concerning some questions about the terms used for his record request. He denied any communication from the city. He also requested that he be allowed to obtain the records directly from the bank rather than through the city. The city responded that the bank would not release its records directly to Mr. Grassi, but would provide the records to the city, which could then release them to Mr. Grassi. Mr. Grassi will not accept records from the city. He also stated that he would not pay any fee for the expense involved in responding to his record request. Iowa Code Section 22.3 allows for the collection of actual costs involved in the retrieval, review, and release of public records. That full section is then put in that footnote. And you'll note at starting at the next to last sentence on that first page, fulfillment of a request for a copy of a public record may be contingent upon receipt of payment of expenses to be incurred in fulfilling the request, and such estimated expenses shall be communicated to the requester upon receipt of the request. At this point in time, the city has not violated Iowa Code Chapter 22 by required receipt of payment for the records prior to release the requested records, in this case, the bank fee of $230. Until he receives and reviews the records, it's premature that the city has not, to assume that the city has not fulfilled his record request. He may be on the phone. He indicated to send an email to me that says, I would like to speak to this hearing, but here's a quick overview. The city's original response was, we won't even tell you where we bank. Then it was, give us $1,000. Then it was, here are the statements we claim from the bank. Then it's, the bank will charge $230, so that makes it a price negotiation. All the information has passed through the city's hands. This presents an opportunity to alter or otherwise filter information. The whole idea is to obtain clean information without the stain of the city. The bank has told me there is a charge. Everything so far has come from the city. A path to resolution would be a statement authorizing the release directly from the bank without any cost. And I'm not sure whether he's on. Don't think he listed his name at the beginning.
Mr. Grassi, are you on the phone with us today? Anybody from the city of West Liberty? Board members?
So he has not paid the $230, I assume?
He hasn't paid anything. He hasn't picked up the records that have been pulled for him. He indicates that he doesn't want any records from the city because he thinks they are.
He thinks they're altering.
He thinks they're altering, and these records would have been ones that can't be altered. But there's some other litigation that's probably going on, but he's not. I think Logan can also speak to it.
Yeah, that's all correct. Yep.
He wants to be able to go to the bank and get whatever records that he wants from the bank.
Is there related litigation he could get the records through the litigation process?
I know there is ongoing litigation between the fire department and the city. I'm not sure. I believe the records that he was given, he asked for the ownership of a piece of land. I believe he's been given that, but I'm not sure any of the other records he requested are applicable to that.
A lot of what and that's in that first footnote, he lists that the city's intercepting funds that belong to the fire and ambulance department and wanted us to participate in that litigation and determine whether or not funds were being properly used.
Do we know who at the city told him he had to pay $1,000 in advance? I mean, who?
I don't think we even got verification that was accurate. The only thing we've gotten is that.
I think that was a statement by Mr. Grassi. I don't think we have any email verification that was said.
That's his claim, but that's
Yes.
not what the city responded. They said it's the $230 that the bank charges for researching and compiling those records.
Have we had any contact with the city?
Yes.
And what is their position?
There was some initial communications. It really goes down to he wants this information directly from the bank, and he is not going to pick them up directly from the city. He wants to go directly through the bank, and the bank is claiming that they will not give him these records directly.
And the other information, like they asked for some questions about what specifically you want, and he's saying he's not going to deal with the city, even though that's where he filed the record request.
I don't, in the bank laws, I don't know what they are, but they have a lot of them. And are they permitted to just give it to a third party? I suppose if they got the bank's notarized power or something, but I don't see how the bank could give it to them anyway.
Not unless the city consents.
Yeah, have to have the city's
I know from, prosecuting crimes and as a county attorney that if I wanted, if bank records were required for part of the discovery process, I had to get them. They wouldn't allow anybody to just walk in and get them.
So at this point, there hasn't been a violation of,
Correct.
okay.
I don't see that we have much choice here.
Another one of those, we don't know everything. Yeah, but I agree with you, based on the face of it, what else can we do? But,
As I say, my most recent attempt to get more information from him resulted in a really short email I received on March 10th that was copied to all sorts of other people.
I'd move to approve the recommendation.
Second?
Moved by Barry, seconded by Keith. All in favor of the dismissal order signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
That's it. The next item on the agenda, Clark Hoffman and Iowa Workforce Development.
As you may recall, this is case number 21-FC0064, and it was before the board previously, and it was actually the report done by Zach Goodrich. And at that time, there were some additional questions asked, and it was returned to our staff. At this point in time, Zach's gone, so I conducted the revision and did the extra review. And so this is on now as a revised probable cause report. I have highlighted or bolded those portions that are new from the time the board last looked at this. And basically, in the February 17th, 2022 IPIB meeting, this report was tabled to allow Iowa Workforce Development Legal Counsel an opportunity to inspect, copy, and release any text on the cell phone issued to the IWD director to determine if any responsive records were available. On February 24th, 2022, IWD Legal Counsel provided a follow-up report along with a screenshot of the cell phone. The screenshot showed that no text had been retained. On February 24th, Mr. Kaufman then filed a new public records request with Iowa Workforce Development, asking for a copy of the text log that Iowa Workforce Development stated would be available for release. Council advised the IPIB that a copy of the log would be provided to the IP as well. On March 4th, 2022, Iowa Workforce Development provided the information attached as attachment 1. Mr. Kaufman has provided follow-up questions to Iowa Workforce Development following this response. And if you want me to explain all of these attachments, based on my past prosecutorial experience, what you have to do is you have to lay them out in sort of a grid, because you read it across as a table, and when you print them off, they don't come out looking exactly like a table. So you'll see that there's, if you read across, if you lay them out, you'll read across an account number, a wireless number, and then they'll go back a couple pages. Then you have a username, billing cycle date, the message date and time, and the to and from number. So what you can see is on the first one, that was Director Townsend. It was a billing date of, it was on March 4th, 2021. The message date and time was February 5th at 10:47, and the number that was engaging in the text was 563-468-3110. So if you were trying to then determine who those were, you'd have to do a search or call the numbers just to see who that is. But that's what a call log looks like. So that's attached there for you to look at it. And actually, when you put enough of the pages together, you can find out whether she sent it or whether the income text message. But these are all, there's a couple that were pictures and videos, but for the most part, they were text. There were some that were redacted, that's the heavy black bars, and according to Iowa Workforce Development, those were redacted because they were confidential. And as I say, this is a new record request, so there hasn't been any complaint filed about the new record request. So under recommendations, I recommend that the IPIB determine probable cause exists to believe that it was a violation as alleged in formal complaint 21FZ0064 because they were not released at the time that they were initially requested. I also recommend that formal complaint be dismissed as an exercise of administrative discretion pursuant to Iowa Administrative Code, as corrective and preventive measures have been taken by the Iowa Workforce Development, and those were provided to you at the last meeting. And then the new paragraph, although the Iowa Workforce Development did not preserve records as requested numerous times by Mr. Kaufman, record retention is not addressed in Iowa Code chapters 21 and 22. Therefore, the IPIB would not have jurisdiction to engage in further enforcement procedures against the Iowa Workforce Development on this issue. So that's where we are at this point on that, and I'm not sure. I heard Mr. Stein was on the phone. I don't know if Mr. Kaufman is. Excuse me, but I do know that Mr. Evans had indicated to me that there was some concern about whether or not we would have, whether or not IPIB has the ability to require government bodies to retain records if there's a record retention, or if there's a complaint concerning records filed with us, if we could do that at the beginning of upon receipt of getting of a complaint, if we could contact and request that the records be retained during the process of the complaint. And we don't have a policy on that, and we're going to put that on the agenda for the Rules Committee to determine whether or not a rule would be appropriate.
You know, I don't think that's really a records retention issue in the
No,
generic
it's
sense, but whenever you get a public records request, certainly you shouldn't be deleting the records until the resolution.
But we don't have an actual policy, or it's not in the statute, or statute.
Even without a statute, people should not be deleting records when they've been requested until the status is resolved. So I think in summary, we tabled it to have Workforce Development search for existing texts that had not happened. They had not looked on the phone as Mr. Kaufman had requested, and apparently there are none that are currently there.
There are none.
They provided what logs on text messages they could provide. Is Mr. Kaufman on the phone?
Yes.
Would you care to talk to the board?
Well, just, yes, I had a couple of comments to make, but just I was looking for one clarification. Given the recommendation from the executive director, is it IWD's position that an agency isn't required to preserve records even after the point where they've been requested?
I wouldn't have an answer to that because that's not something that's within our rules or our statute, and this is the first time it's been mentioned.
Okay, well, I mean, that would be sort of a critical element in this case. We know the director's phone now, a year after the request was made, doesn't have any text messages on it at all. So then the question becomes, well, when were those records deleted? You know, my larger point, though, is that again, I'm a little concerned that the board's the recommendation to the board is dismissal. You know, IWD is a major state agency with a lot of legal expertise at its fingertips, and I don't see that at any point in the past year it made any sort of a good faith effort to comply with the open records law. We were asking for text messages on the director's phone, which would have been readily accessible. I've never suggested that they needed to go look at that phone the day I filed the request or even the week I filed the request. But I did ask them to look for those records, and I also asked them to preserve those records in the meantime, realizing that they could be deleted just as a matter of policy or through routine purging or just by accident. and they ignored 6 or 7 requests to preserve those records, and their only explanation was that they preferred to rely on a private company, a third-party vendor with 89 million customers, as the source for these records that were on the director's phone at one time at least. Now, the records are no longer there, I understand that. But absent any showing of good faith by IWD in this case, I don't know how the board would even consider dismissing the complaint, particularly since we're not just looking at the issue of preserving the records. There are still the findings from the IPIP legal counsel that IWD violated the law in at least 2 other respects. It delegated to a private vendor the responsibility of maintaining and turning over state records, which, as the analysis in your case summary points out, is directly in violation of the state law. And then separately, it repeatedly failed to comply with a request for all exhibits in an unemployment case and withheld 380 of, I believe, 397 pages of records, and repeatedly asserted it had given me all the records that there were to give. So in light of all that, combined with, again, what I think is the lack of good faith by the department, I hope that the board doesn't simply dismiss the case. Thanks.
Mr. Stein, are you on the phone?
This is David Steen, Attorney Power Workforce Development. I didn't hear anything new in Mr. Kaufman's statements there. We responded to all of that in the previous meeting then, right? So I really don't have anything to add.
Okay. Board comments and questions?
I'm having a little trouble hearing. This is Rick on the phone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Margaret, I'm a little confused in your addition to Zach's recommendation. You say that record retention is not addressed in Iowa Code chapters 21 and 22. Does that suggest that a public body can destroy records as soon as they're made? I mean, I would think that it's just implicit in chapter 22 that public records are open and can't be destroyed willy-nilly. Is that not the case?
There's in the code there are record retention rules for state agencies, and those are supposed to go through. Eventually, end up with a state archivist. But for small agents or for everybody else, there's nothing as to record retention, and there really isn't anything specific as to record retention in chapters 21 and 22 outside of a reference to have a records policy with state agencies. But that's been.
Does that mean then that a public body can, after a meeting, can simply discard the records?
It doesn't mean that necessarily, because that's covered in other code sections. It's not, I'm just saying chapters 21 and 22 do not have any sections that specifically address record retention. There are lots of other code sections throughout the code, such as with birth certificates, death certificates, marriage licenses, driver's license records, minutes. The only thing that specifically is addressed in record retention, probably under Chapter 21, is if you have a closed session, you have to maintain the minutes and the recording for a period of at least 1 year.
So what you're saying then is we have no jurisdiction over a public body that destroys records because it's not in Chapter 22 specifically?
I would say that, it would be really hard for us to prosecute something that we don't have jurisdiction over.
Well, I disagree.
I guess I just disagree with that. Just prima facie.
I think clearly once public records are requested, there's an obligation in complying with the public records law not to get rid of them before the request is responded to. In this particular case, I think Workforce Development was relying on Verizon and assuming they were maintaining records for public records purposes. That was an error, and Workforce Development has cooperated in changing that perspective, that you can't expect Verizon to do the retention for you.
Julie, this is Joan. Then can I ask, in following with what you just said, if they understand that they can expect Verizon to retain them, do they have in existence what private businesses have? I know that my husband's phone has, he uses his own phone for his business purposes, but he has software on it that retains anything that's related to his business, and the same with business assigned phones, so that there is record retention. Is there something like that that is required of entities?
Well, Mr. Steen could probably answer that. I think investigation showed that Verizon isn't obligated and hasn't chosen to maintain text by their customers. And so...
No, I'm not talking about Verizon. I'm talking about a software system that retains those records like it's done in businesses.
Mr. Steen, can you respond to
Joe,
that?
I don't know, Monica. I think I know what you're talking about, and of course I have my iPad email set up on my phone, and my security policy comes from the state that tags my phone, but it's only for my emails. It's not for my text messages.
Barry, thank you. That's helpful.
So I think that's the difference.
Thank you.
Did you have anything to add to that, Mr. Steen?
No, I do not.
This is Clark Kaufman. If I could just add one more thing, it's the same point I raised earlier, which is that the critical issue here is when these records were destroyed. We know they don't exist on the director's phone, so it might be worth knowing when those records disappeared from the director's phone.
Mr. Steen, is that discernible from the director's phone when the texts were deleted?
Well, as we stated in our written response to Mr. Kaufman, that I believe is produced in attachment 1 there, transitory messages are deleted on a regular basis. So, no, I don't have a date time, but I also think that it's definitely not fair to assume that text messages were deleted after some previous week.
And that's certainly fair. I would just point out that our record request, when it was filed, and that request, of course, included a request that you preserve the records, that request was right up to the moment of any text messages that would have been filed up to that very day. So if there were text messages that were deleted after that request was filed, those deletions would have been made after the point the request was filed with IWD. Thank you.
Mr. Steen, can you give us an explanation on why those messages were deleted after, even though there was half a dozen requests for them?
Well, I can't say that they were deleted after that time.
No, but can you tell us why they were deleted in the face of half a dozen requests that not take place?
Well, I can't say that they were. I have no information to indicate that they were deleted post any request. Messages within Iowa Workforce Development are, when we use text messaging, we use it in a transitory nature. We don't conduct substantive business over text message. That has always been the case. And so, as I've stated from the beginning of this matter to Mr. Kaufman and to the board, text messages are used on a regular basis. So, without a doubt, I can't say, hey, text messages were deleted after Mr. Kaufman made his request. I have no reason to believe that. And what we have here is the record of the text messages, the list that was provided by Verizon. But there is a lot of assumption being built in to state that text messages were deleted in the face of Mr. Kaufman's request.
But Mr. Kaufman never received any response after his first request that they be saved, nor after the second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth. That just doesn't make any sense, does it?
I think as we've discussed before, I don't think the law calls for the state agency to provide the requester with an explanation of how preservation will take place.
Well,
Or if it will.
correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Steen.
And Mr. Steen, just to that point, I don't want to get involved in an exchange, but I wasn't asking for an explanation. I was simply asking that the records be preserved. And again, my request was for text messages that would have been sent or received right up to the point where I sent in my request. So unless the director is deleting messages within seconds of sending and receiving them, and does that with all of her text messages, then it would stand to reason that they were deleted after the request was filed. And I'll leave my comments at that. Thank you.
Well, this is Julie again. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it true, Mr. Steen, that during that time period you were relying on Verizon to maintain those? Having discovered that they weren't, you've changed your procedure.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I do want to just clarify, Mr. Kaufman just stated that he didn't ask for an explanation. I know specifically, I don't have the email in front of me, but I probably get a hold of them. The phrase that was used repeatedly was, you want to know the steps that were being taken for the preservation. So I don't know if we want to split hairs and say that's not asking for an explanation. I would interpret it that way. But yes, as like stated to the board, this was the first time we had a request of this nature at Iowa Workforce Development. So given that, we operate on the same philosophy that we do with emails. We go to the OCIO for emails because they have the complete record of everything sent and received, whether it's been deleted or not. And so we went to Verizon under the same assumption. And yes, having discovered that Verizon does not keep those records at all, that would not be our course of action in the future.
Okay, further question or discussion from the board?
If we don't dismiss, what's the alternative? We
Okay.
find probable cause exists, and then what?
Well, your choices are to find the probable cause. They're listed. Fourth page. There's four choices, and the four choices are: you can redirect the matter for further investigation, you can dismiss the matter for lack of probable cause to believe a violation has occurred, you can make a determination that probable cause exists to believe a violation has occurred, but as an exercise of administrative discretion, dismiss the matter, or make a determination that probable cause exists to believe a violation has occurred, designate a prosecutor, and direct the issuance of a statement of charges to initiate a contested case proceeding. And the recommendation was C, that there is probable cause exists to believe a violation has occurred, but as an exercise of administrative discretion, dismiss the matter.
And the administrative discretion is based on Workforce Development's agreement to change its procedures. Having discovered you can't use Verizon to maintain your text messages. They've been quite cooperative in doing that.
It's sort of similar to like prosecutorial discretion. It could be, you take into consideration that when you have the two alternatives, what is going to be the most effective and successful too, when you're looking at it.
I think if workforce development hadn't cooperated in revising their approach, we'd be in a different position. But I'm not sure we're better off after a contested case when they've already taken those steps.
Julie, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
That was Rick?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm having voice recognition issues today.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll identify myself.
No, that's okay. My point to Barry was simply that we'd be in a different position if workforce development hadn't already taken steps to change their approach to records retention. But having been cooperative and made changes in their processes, I'm not sure what prosecuting a contested case will achieve.
Margaret, this is Joan and Julie, I guess. So I'm not an attorney, so the details of this are, I don't have the language to go with it, but I'm a little bit confused. If the recommendation, let's see, the determination that there's probable cause exists to believe IWD violated Iowa Chapter 22, but then dismissed. But if that first thing, then how does it follow that record retention isn't addressed in Chapter 22? And you had said, therefore, it would be hard to have a contested case over something that we have no jurisdiction over. I'm having trouble reckoning those two, and it's my own understanding. I'm putting that on myself.
Okay. If we were to file a contested case, we would have to, first off, prove we have the jurisdiction to hear that. When you file a contested case, we file it as before the Iowa Public Information Board, but we filed as the petitioner being the Iowa Public Information Board, and the respondent in this case, Iowa Workforce Development. Normally, we've had those heard by the ALJs on that. And then we have the burden of proving that there was a violation of Iowa Code Chapter 22, and as that's how you go forward. It's in a criminal case, you have to prove that you had venue, that it took place where you allege it took place. You'd have to present evidence showing the violation. You'd have to establish that it was a violation, therefore, like provide the law that it was violated. So it's similar to that. We would have to prove what statute was violated. We'd have to list the statute under Chapters 21 and 22, because that's what we have the authority to proceed on, and then present evidence as to how that, what happened and how that comes within our jurisdiction and is a violation of Iowa Code Chapters 21 or 22.
Thank you.
This is a case that bothers me like others have. And I understand what the staff is recommending, but it appears to me what we're saying is that there have been a couple of violations here, but we're going to dismiss it anyway. Because the language of the statute says which you're recommending, and I understand why, make a determination that probable cause exists to believe a violation. And I'm not sure that's the same as a violation has occurred.
That's true, yeah.
And so I guess, and I've run into this problem before, but this one is more glaring, and I feel comfortable saying it doesn't fit to me to go along with the recommendation which Margaret has made. But I'm not sure I can pose anything other than proceed with probable cause, a contested case, and resolve it by saying, yes, a violation did occur, rather than a violation, it appears, or the language of the statute, that we believe a violation may have occurred. Now, maybe I'm splitting hairs, but I think there's a difference.
Well, I think the basic thrust of the recommendation is, given workforce development's cooperation and changes that they've made, they now understand their texts were not being preserved by Verizon, that there's not much to be accomplished by proceeding with the prosecution.
Well, I understand the rationale. I'm just saying that the precedent of the case, if you might, is not that a violation has occurred. The precedent of the case is that probable cause exists to believe a violation has occurred. And that, I think those are different. That's what I'm saying.
Right. And I mean, the only way we can say that it has occurred would be to file a contested case.
Right, I understand, you know. But I also agree with Julie saying, what do you accomplish? But what you accomplish is the precedence to establishing that a violation did occur as opposed to that one may have occurred.
Does it matter if they've already changed their practice, so it won't occur in the future?
Well, I guess it depends on who you ask. I mean, I think it does make a difference. But I don't know. I guess that's where I'm at on the issue.
Well, you could, I don't know what the case is. I mean, I don't know what is suspected, or if it's even suspected that something being hidden. I mean, if there is something that, I don't know what they're looking, you know, I know that they're interested in who you talk to during certain periods of time, and I think the record, looking at what we've been given, is that Verizon must eliminate those on some calendar basis. Otherwise, there's no way they can keep all that stuff. So I'm not ready to say, well, we've got probable cause here, because I don't know what is. I mean, if it was, I don't know, burning down the State House or something was being discussed, but I don't know what it is. And they could go look at my calls and say, well, he doesn't have any of the, we can't get those text messages. We don't know, what he was up to in November and December of 2021. And it's created a problem that I don't know, I just don't know how you do business and then comply with this kind of thing. I mean, I don't know whatever story was behind this, I just don't know. I mean, I assume there's some information that led Clark to go where he went. Now,
He requested the text messages. They aren't there. Mr. Steen explained he thought Verizon was retaining them, just like the state system retains emails. They were not. They're gone. If that had happened and Mr. Steen persisted in relying on Verizon, I think we might have something to prosecute. But since he understands now that's not something he can rely on to retain text messages for him, I don't know what we accomplish. A contested case won't tell you what the text messages were. They aren't there. They can't be retrieved.
Well,
So I don't know what we'd accomplish by having a hearing.
I don't either.
Well, that's not the only alleged violation.
He reiterated today, he asked for exhibits and was given a fraction of the ones that existed. That error was corrected and the rest of the exhibits were provided.
And that's one of the violations.
Yes. Right.
But he had not persisted, he wouldn't have gotten it.
Maybe not, but he did.
So if we didn't dismiss and we moved ahead with the designated prosecutor, what would the remedy be if there it was found to be a violation? I mean, what?
I think your only remedy you'd be looking at would be a fine, or it's not a fine, it's called statutory damages of $100 to $500, or if you can prove that it was knowingly done, then it'd be $1,000 to $2,500. So Iowa Workforce Development would have to pay to the state of Iowa either between $100 and $500 or $1,000 to $2,500. That's statutory damages.
I think the more important turning point is when we did the report, had we accepted it, which we did. In an informal resolution, they would have revised Workforce Development's procedures. Mr. Kaufman wouldn't cooperate with any informal resolution, and Workforce Development agreed anyway to change their procedures. So I think we're still at this point only because Mr. Kaufman would go through the informal resolution process. Is everybody too perplexed to make a motion? I would if I could.
And I've said it before, I just think that, I guess my question is, and I think I know the answer, but I mean, obviously, if you have, I'm not asking for a fine, I'm just asking for a finding that there was a holding, if you might, that a violation occurred. I'm not, beyond that, I don't care.
Yeah, and I don't think we can do that without doing a contested case.
So we go through that with every time we have
I know.
a probable cause report.
And every time I'm bothered by it.
Can you be bothered one more time?
Go ahead, I'm obviously in the minority, but I have to express my opinion.
Well, and, we've had a lot of discussions about how we used to be able to enter, there was at one point in time a rule that probably is unconstitutional that allowed us to just make orders without hearings, but now, that's no longer part of the rule. So, the rule is if we want to make an order, we have to go through the contested case proceeding.
I understand.
But even that rotten rule wouldn't have helped. Because
Well, I mean, like-
the texts aren't there. So
Yeah,
order
that's
in
right.
those books.
Well, I think, and maybe it's a fallacy in the statute, or maybe from my point of view, it's a fallacy in the statute, but anyway, you've heard enough of me.
EJ, this is Monica. I tend to agree with you on this one. This case is one that gives me heartburn. But I guess if everybody else is done discussing, I would move that we accept number C, make a determination that probable cause exists to believe a violation has occurred, but as an exercise of administrative discretion, dismiss the matter.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Moved by Monica, seconded by Barry. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Julie, point of order, are you asking for dissension?
I will.
Also?
If everybody's done voting aye, I
Okay.
will. Any opposed?
Okay, yes.
I vote no. Rick votes no.
Joan votes no.
So, you want to do a roll call? Just
I think
We can do
want
that.
I think we know who voted no. That's okay.
right. We just don't know who voted yes.
I'm going to go in reverse alphabetical order then.
Whatever makes you happy.
Joan Corbin. How do you vote?
Nay.
E.J. Giovanetti.
No?
Nay.
Barry Lindahl.
Aye.
Keith Luchtel.
Aye.
Monica McHugh.
Aye.
Rick Moraine.
No.
Julie Potter.
Aye.
Susan Stewart is absent. Julie, that's 4-3.
Motion carries by a very narrow margin. The matter is dismissed. Thank you to the parties for your patience on the phone. Our next case is Tad McDowell and the Mills County Assessor and Auditor. Mill County. It's Mills County.
It's Mills County.
It says Mill on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Margaret?
All right, first off, I've got some last minute notes that came from the complainant that he wanted distributed, so I'll do that. I think he's just going to read it, so you'll have this. But, this is Tad McDowell, complainant in the Mills.
Go ahead. He'll be back.
This is Tad McDowell, the complainant, and Mills County Assessor and Auditor is the respondent. Case number 22FC0006, and it's before you as a dismissal order. This complaint was filed on February 11, 2022, alleging that the Mills County Assessor and Auditor violated Iowa Code Chapter 22. He alleged that on January 28th, he requested copies of invoices and/or county records regarding payments made to Brett Ryan or the Watson and Ryan law firm in 2021 and 2022. He also alleged that he requested a copy of the 2021 sales ratio study and that both requests were denied. And since the filing of this complaint, he has received that sales ratio study and withdrew that portion of his complaint. On February 21st, legal counsel for the assessor filed a response to the complaint. In this response, he referred to district court litigation that resulted in a court order determining that Mr. McDowell must request certain public records as discovery through the court litigation. If you recall, that was previously before us as a complaint filed by Mr. McDowell, and that it involved his property assessment and the fact that he filed in district court, and so that district court order is in part put in that footnote that just said that he would have to request for any information that is relevant and relates to the issues on appeal should be directed to counsel representing the defendant as a discovery request. And so in one effect, sort of limited the access to public records that anybody else would have. The court had also ruled this order does not prohibit the plaintiff from making lawful public records requests in accordance with Iowa Code Chapter 22 that would otherwise not violate this court's order. That district court case was actually dismissed on January 28, 2022, the same day that he requested the copies of the records. Legal counsel noticed that although the district court case was resolved, there is litigation continuing as Mr. McDowell has an appeal pending before the Iowa Property Assessment Appeal Board, that's PAB. He alleged that the PAB appeal is not litigation as required to enact Iowa Code Section 22.74, which is the code section that the assessor's attorney indicated would preclude or prohibit the release of the records that he requested. Iowa Code Section 22.21 states every person shall have the right to examine a copy of a public record and to publish or otherwise disseminate a public record or the information contained in a public record. It does not restrict this right to only those individuals who are not engaged in litigation with a lawful custodian. Certain attorney work product records are considered confidential under Iowa Code Section 22.74. And those records are records which represent and constitute the work product of an attorney, which are related to litigation or claim made by or against a public body. An appeal filed against the Mills County Board of Review to the PAB would appear to be a claim filed against Mills County as envisioned by this code section. However, it's not necessary to determine if the assessor's public records concern payment of costs to legal, determine if that record request fall within this confidentiality protection. Granted, there could be some information in the invoices submitted by legal counsel or the law firm to the assessor, but the warrants paid for legal fees should not contain that information. Any confidential information contained in the warrant could be redacted, leaving the amount paid and the date of payment. On March 9th, Mr. McDowell reminded IPIB staff that his record request and the subsequent complaint was directed to both the assessor and the auditor. As of that date, the auditor or county attorney had not responded to the complaint. On 3/9, a copy of the proposed acceptance order, because initially I had determined this would be an acceptance, was provided to Mills County attorney for comment on the legal analysis concerning release of the public records. The Mills County attorney noted concurs with the legal analysis provided, requested a copy of the original record request, and subsequently released the requested records. And the county attorney told me that the records were public records and released them about an hour after I contacted that office. The requested records have now been released. Mr. McDowell indicated that the assessor should be considered separately since that office would not release the records. However, he addressed his record request to both offices jointly and filed his complaint and alleged violations by both offices jointly. At this point in time, my recommendation is to dismiss this complaint. But the allegation that the assessor did not release the records, that the auditor released the records, is correct.
Mr. McDowell, are you still on the phone with us?
I am still on.
And would
Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead if you'd like to speak
Okay.
to the board.
In person, sorry, I know you have these words in front of you. I'll read this for the people that are on the phone. I do appreciate your time. I'll read it, and then I will leave you to do your job. Thank you for your time today, first of all. I've filed multiple complaints with the IPIB over the last several months. The Mills County Assessor has been receiving legal guidance from a private attorney that has repeatedly advised her to receive violation of Iowa Code 22. The complaint under review today was tentatively accepted by on March 9th. The complaint was originally filed around February 14th. At that time, the IPIB sent a copy of the complaint to the Mills County Assessor, her private attorney, the Mills County Auditor, and the Mills County Attorney. Each entity had a chance to respond. The assessor and her attorney, Mr. Brett Ryan, were the only ones to respond. By the county attorney's own admission to me and Ms. Johnson, she was aware that Mr. Ryan responded to the IPIB on behalf of the county. She was CC'd on email communications from Mr. Ryan to the IPIB, where he refused to comply with the public records request. As such, he was aware and complicit in the refusal to provide access to public records. As Ms. Johnson noted, she sent a draft acceptance order to all parties on March 9th, and almost immediately upon being made aware of the acceptance order, the county attorney produced the records. She had, it's critical to remember that she was well aware the complaint had been made. Multiple county officials refused to provide access to these records. She had every opportunity to intervene and provide these records, but refused to until Ms. Johnson sent out the draft acceptance order. It's plainly obvious that Mills County would not have released these records unless the IPIB accepted or threatened to accept the complaint. Mills County has now been a repeat offender of Iowa Code 22. Every IPIB order states, Iowa Code Section 23.8 requires that a complaint be within IPIB's jurisdiction, appear legally sufficient, and have merit before the IPIB accepts a complaint. Herein lies the significance when the IPIB accepts a complaint, because your acceptance order gives the complaint validity. I'm speaking today to request the IPIB accept this complaint because it was a valid complaint. The IPIB has all the evidence necessary to prove that Mills County officials had every opportunity to provide these records prior to an acceptance order, but they chose not to. Dismissing this complaint removes credibility from the complaint and lets Mills County off the hook. Please don't do this. Citizens need to be able to document problems in their government administration in order to hold government officials accountable. I'm asking the IPIB to accept this complaint and immediately resolve it via an informal resolution. I'm simply asking the IPIB to have the record accurately reflect what transpired. Separately, I'm asking the IPIB, the last part's about note 3 in the draft order. I don't believe it actually paints an accurate picture. As it currently reads, it seems as though the Mills County attorney provided the records within an hour of being contacted by the IPIB. That's not true. She sat on the complaint and failed to respond for almost a month. More accurately, the county attorney provided the records within an hour of being informed of a draft acceptance order, which is a clear admission that she was wrong. I don't believe Ms. Johnson disputes these facts based on the email she sent yesterday. I asked her to revise that note, but she said she could not because everything had already been disseminated to the board. And a last note, I didn't write this in my note, but under Iowa Code 22, public officials are protected from punishment if they operate under the guidance of a lawyer. In this case, a private attorney has given advice to government officials on multiple occasions in direct violation of Iowa's sunshine laws. Since I can't hold the government official accountable, I can only file a grievance against the attorney to the Iowa Supreme Court. Accepted complaints, that is, complaints with legal sufficiency and merit, will hold far more sway than a dismissed complaint. If this complaint is dismissed, I guarantee you the attorney will use the dismissed status to undermine the sufficiency and merit of my complaint. I appreciate your time. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. McDowell. Is anybody here for Mills County on the phone? Anything further in response to Mr. McDowell?
The only thing I can do is on that third footnote, I can certainly change this to put a period after the words "were public records" and just delete the rest of that. She had been notified at various times, initially when the complaint was opened by an email with an attachment, and also I think there was one other time that she was copied on something, but the actual contact with me was on March 9th, and that's where in the middle of that second page I talk about March 9th and then providing and I can actually, if you want me to, on the same date, a copy of the proposed acceptance orders was provided, so that was. But other than that, yes, the dates and times and everything else is correct. But my conversation, because she contacted me by telephone as soon as I sent the proposed acceptance order, she contacted me and said what she told me was that she was unaware that those hadn't been released, and was agreed that they should be released, at least maybe not the invoices that came to the assessor, but the warrant information that was sent out by the county and paying the bills, and that all of that was just part of their budget information and definitely was a public record. And it was released promptly at that point.
Questions or comments from board members?
Margaret, this is Rick. Why did the complaint, why does it not meet the requirements? The 3 requirements?
Well, my analysis was that I was uncertain to what extent the county attorney and the auditor had, because there was no communications between them, had actually discussed this and whether they had just relied on the assessor and the assessor's attorney to deal with this. And when I initially reviewed this and wrote my first order, which was going to be an acceptance order, I had left the auditor off. I didn't even notice that was part of the complaint. And then when that was brought to my attention by Mr. McDowell, then I read through there and added the auditor on there and sent that out. And at that point in time, I immediately got a phone call from the county attorney saying that, that she was unaware of exactly what was going on in this, basically, I think. And then she said, yeah, we'll just release those records. So at this point in time, I'm not quite sure. I know Mr. McDowell wants us to go forward and try to get an informal resolution. But frankly, I don't think I can get an informal resolution approved by the attorney for the assessor, because he continues to say that those are attorney work product and should be released.
I don't want to interrupt, I wanted to say one more thing. I want to highlight, the county attorney was informed by the IPIB on February 14th that this complaint was outstanding. You can't just say she didn't know about it. He clearly knew about it.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison.
We sent it to her office. We did confirm with her personally.
Further questions or comments?
So the custodian was lawful custodian.
Actually, the auditor would be the lawful custodian. The assessor would have copies of the invoices, and depending on whether or not the assessor would make copies of the form you have to fill out to send it to the auditor for payment, those all go in and out of the auditor's office.
But based on your investigation, the auditor was not aware that
I'm not sure about the auditor. This whole thing was about the county attorney. When I sent it to the county attorney, but I'll be honest, I know who she is because she's also county attorney where I used to be county attorneys. But I just sent it directly to her, and she called me immediately. So, these should have been released.
All right, but that's my point. It appears your investigation shows that as soon as they realized that they were not released, they were released.
Correct. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure what you do when you have a complaint filed or records request filed to two different offices, and one office responds and the other doesn't.
Litigation.
There is litigation, but
So there's a free one.
I was kind of happy I got
This is Ken McDonald. Can I read an email from Nada Elliott from yesterday?
No, we're continuing with board discussion right now.
Margaret, this is Rick again. I'm sorry, I'm still a little unclear. When did you notify the county auditor and the county assessor of the complaint?
Okay, that initially went out, I have to pull the file to get the exact date, but when a complaint comes in, Brett actually makes a copy of the complaint, he scans it and sends it, the board gets a copy, and then the copy is sent to also the other side, and the complainant is notified that that the copy has come in. So this was actually filed on February 11th, which was a Friday, and I'm not sure what time, 2:30 in the afternoon, and it went out to parties on February 14th, and at 3:47, it went out to the assessor, the auditor, the attorney for Mills County, and Ryan Watson, the assessor's attorney. It says, Ms. Govig, Ms. Robertson, Ms. Elliott, and Mr. Ryan, a formal complaint has been filed with the Iowa Public Information Board by Tad McDowell against the Mills County assessor and auditor. The complaint alleged a violation of Iowa Code Chapter 22. Please review the attached complaint and provide a response to the IPIB. If you have any questions, contact our office. Thank you for your assistance. And it was sent out by Brett. So that's the sum total of the notification.
Yeah, thank you. And then you got a response from both offices?
No, I only got a response from the assessor, but those responses were copied at times to the county attorney and the auditor by that private attorney. But I don't know for sure which ones. The only ones that I know for sure that he sent to them was ones that I was copied on. So I'm not quite sure if Ms. Elliott got all of the responses, or if the auditor got all of the responses.
Okay, thank you.
Margaret, this is Monica. So if I understand it, there is litigation involving the assessor's office, but not the auditor's office in the same matter.
There is an appeal that's been filed with the State Property Assessment Advisory Board, or whatever.
Advisory Appeal Board.
Yeah, the appeals board. This all goes back. We had the previous complaint was concerning a request for records during the course of the appeal to district court. I guess when your property is assessed and you disagree with it, you have the right to go to the to the review board for the assessor, and then if you are dissatisfied with that response, then you would usually it's either you take it to the state and appeal it to the PAAB, or you appeal it to district court. In this case, it went both places. The district court case was dismissed on January 28th of this year of 2022. The appeal is still pending to the panel.
Okay,
Who are the parties to
Okay.
the appeal?
The parties on the appeal are Mr. McDowell and the assessor, Mills County assessor.
So he had all this, wouldn't he have all that information all the time?
Wouldn't-
I'm confused again.
Well, he's only asking for how much money the county spent during a certain period of time on this outside legal counsel. And we could get really technical.
Right.
The assessor actually has a budget the assessor's considered a county assessor, but it's not really within the oversight of the Board of Supervisors or anything. The assessor is a separate agency that their board, the board that overlooks them, is consisted of the Board of Supervisors, the mayors of the various cities in that county, and the school districts in that county. And each one of those three subgroups has one vote, and they're the ones that set the budget. And it comes out of the assessor's monies. So that's how they can have their own private counsel and pay the private counsel whatever they want.
Well, the bottom line is you're recommending dismissal because the records have been provided.
Correct.
Typically, that's what we do, is dismiss when the records have been provided. Proceed.
Yeah, I would say typically when the whole complaint process, the complaint is filed, we notify the other side, and then, however, whether it's by us contacting the other side and encouraging the release of the records or whatever, then those complaints are often withdrawn or dismissed because that's sort of our statutory obligation, is to try to resolve complaints efficiently and effectively. So that's
There you go.
it's
Turned over.
it's kind of like we did an informal resolution without having to do an informal resolution.
Is anybody ready to make a motion?
this is Monica, I move that we accept the dismissal order.
Second.
Moved by Monica, seconded by EJ,
What was the motion?
to accept the dismissal order. All in favor of accepting the dismissal order signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The order is accepted.
And I will make that, I noticed that there's a typo and also that correction on page 2. I'll go ahead and do that before I pass it out or send it out.
Okay, the last case on our action agenda, I don't even think I can guess at the first name, Ms. Morrissey and the City of Des Moines, for which you people have been waiting patiently the whole meeting.
Oh, and this
And
may
that's-
be, how do you pronounce your first name?
Jada.
Jada?
Jada,
Okay.
glad I didn't try. Margaret?
I was making it way too Italian. Okay, Jada. That's, I don't even know how it is. Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
This kid doesn't move very well.
That's okay. It's not a good time for you to. Well, not yet, I'm going to go through this. Okay. This complaint was filed on February 6, 2022. It's case number 22FC Rudiata Moresi and the City of Des Moines. Ms. Moresi alleged that the city failed to release records she requested on December 21st, 2021. The records requested were the records created during a Zoom meeting. At the time of the filing of her complaint, she noted that the city had not responded to her request. She asked for an explanation as to why records were not released or whether the records still exist. On February 8th, 2 days later, the city's legal counsel responded to the complaint and indicated that the record request would be immediately investigated. On February 10th, the city provided copies of the records located in the Zoom question and answer function of the record. Counsel added that Ms. Moresi had requested records from the Zoom chat function, a separate function of the Zoom meeting. Ms. Moresi replied to the city noting that she did not limit her record request to one function of the Zoom meeting and that there were in fact still unreleased records that were created during the Zoom meeting. Following this comment, legal counsel conducted another search and found another question and answer document. Counsel stated that two different departments had created records. Initially, it was thought the records were identical, but upon further review, it was determined that two separate records were created. On February 22nd, IPIB staff asked Ms. Moresi if all records had been received. On March 1st, she stated that she was glad that the city had finally released the records for public feedback, but that the city still withheld the records for over 2 months. She stated that she would have liked to have had these records to reference during the city's public listening post on January 29, 2022. She added the untimely release of the records has prevented members of the public from engaging with the city's budget process. Iowa Code Section 22.22 states a government body shall not prevent the examination or copying of a public record by contracting with a non-government body to perform any of its duties or functions. Using the Zoom application to conduct meetings is permissible, but the government body has a responsibility to appropriately retrieve records created and stored by the Zoom function. In this complaint, the city would not have properly searched and found the two separate records had not the complainant known that the first response was incomplete. The city may want to modify its procedure for retrieving records to ensure this mistake does not occur in the future. I'm recommending dismissal. I listed this as a harmless error. Specifically this factual situation, since in fact probably because Ms. Moresi was able to advocate for a review and then another review of the possible records.
Now's your opportunity to address the board. We have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. The Iowa Public Information Board must not dismiss my complaint. They must either choose to accept it or amend the written order to provide the explanation required by Iowa Code Section 23.8. The City of Des Moines withheld the records from my public records request on December 21st, 2021. The request was not fulfilled until February 22nd, 2022, after the Iowa Public Information Board got involved and the City of Des Moines was caught misrepresenting my request. While this incident appears to have begun with confusion around a Zoom feature, when the city claimed the records did not exist, the city continued to withhold the records even after clarification of my request on January 7th, 2022, and even after February 10th, 2022, when emails they released to the Iowa Public Information Board indicated that they did have the records that had not been released. This appears to be more than a simple error, and at a minimum suggests that more investigation into what happened in the city would be appropriate. I've explained how the withholding of these records caused harm to myself and others. Primarily, these records pertain to the city budget process, and by the time the records were released, as you mentioned, the initial city budget had already been proposed and discussed with the City Council. These relevant records were omitted from consideration. They were eventually added to a city report on February 16th, so the city has acknowledged that these records were meant to be involved in the process. However, despite being added on the 16th, the records were not sent to me until February 22nd. This board is moving to dismiss this complaint as a harmless error, but the board has not provided an explanation as to why this incident would be considered a harmless error. I have shown the harm that this caused, and the city's conduct suggests that this may be more than a simple error. In Iowa Code Section 23.8, it states that if the board refuses to accept a complaint, the board shall provide the complainant with a written order explaining its reasons for the action. As the board has not explained its determination in the written order, they have not met the requirements to dismiss the complaint.
Thank you. Ms.
Thank
Mosier?
you. Is it okay if I stand up in front of the group? Or
Absolutely.
Thank you. Honorable board members, staff, and persons in attendance and the complainant. My name is Carol Moser. I'm a deputy city attorney with the city of Des Moines, but I have throughout my career been involved in transparency on behalf of the city and the processes for providing public records. And I think we've explained to this board previously that the city does take this very, very seriously. This was indicated by several years ago where the city hired a full-time open records coordinator who has accompanied me here. Her name is Lisa Mickey, and she works very hard to fulfill dozens of requests as quickly as possible. In this matter, the city of Des Moines, we have is a big organization. I think all of you know that. And we don't, as those of us who work to fulfill the public records request, we don't necessarily know whether there are records out there. But when we are asked if there are records, we seek to fulfill them. We find out, we have to do a lot of detective work. In fact, Lisa has to determine whether what departments are involved. And in this particular case, we found out that the finance department, the IT department, and the public information officers department were involved. Because of restrictions for gathering, we contacted these individuals separately. And as of January 7th of 2022, we believed we had fulfilled the complainant's request. And in fact, via email, she thanked Lisa for the quick turnaround. We had no idea because when we asked for the information, we indicated what had been requested. We asked for all records that would have been either in a question and answer function that would have been generated at 2 budget meetings held by the finance department that involved the city manager. We asked for everything. We asked for anything and everything that would be relevant to that request. We were told that we had it. We asked again, and as of January 7th, we did not have any idea that we had not completely fulfilled that request until we received notice on or about February 6th, almost a month later of 2022, that the complainant had made a complaint and indicating that there were still documents that she believed were missing. Our response, both from Lisa and myself, was to contact all the employees involved and said, clearly there's another document out there we don't have, we don't know what we don't have, please check again. And we wanted also, whenever there's an IPIP complaint, we want to be very responsive very quickly. And so in order to turn that around, again, we double checked. Unfortunately, this scenario is, and some of you may know what I'm referring to, the Abbott and Costello comedy sketch, who's on first, what's on second, but it was an unfunny version. We were very frustrated about making these requests, to the point that I put together a meeting for everyone so that we were all talking at the same time and said, there is obviously a document out there. We never had any doubt that if there was a document, we would release it. It was no question as to whether it was public. We want to release it. I don't know whether you've had an opportunity to look at the substance of the document. There's absolutely no reason why we would not issue it. We found out on that meeting on February 16th is when we gathered everyone together, and that's when we realized how we have 2 forms of question and answer. And there were 2 different documents, and as soon as we realized that, that was posted electronically that date. Because I was in depositions and I would be the one that would be responding to the board, because I had responded to the board initially, I had someone advise the board that it would take me a couple more days to do a second response. And that is why the board did not have the information that had already been posted electronically on February 16th until we submitted our formal response, second response, on February 22nd. Now, to address, obviously, if we had had it, we would have released it if we knew what we had. We did not know that. So as soon as we knew what the error was, we released it. Now, and the reason that we believe that this is not harm to the complainant is because of the openness and continuing opportunities to post on the city's website input regarding the budget process. On February 18th, a notice went out via the state form as well as a press release, and as well as notices on the website that indicated the ongoing process for the budget, and that the budget hearing would be, I'll hurry up here, the budget hearing would be had this coming Monday. There is an open hearing on Monday, the 21st, I believe it is, during the council meeting. There has been no cutoff or obstacle placed in the citizens' way to make sure their interest in the budget process is communicated. And for that reason, we think that there is not harm. The documents have been released, and the process has been open. Obviously, we will continue to harangue our colleagues if we think that we have not been given all the information that we've asked for. So thank you for listening to me and giving me a few more minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Board questions or comments?
Have there been, Counselor, any systems devised or discussion to avoid the problem in the future?
I wish I could say that the problem with this is that even our IT director was not clear on what the Zoom process was. So I just, I hate it as an attorney to sort of be testifying here, but my own personal experience has been, we kept asking the same question over and over again and said, we know there's a document out there, where could it possibly be? And that's, and so I think that the lesson that we've learned is, even as we're remote working, although we're not as much anymore, we've got to gather absolutely everybody in the room at the same time to ask, or on the same screen to answer those questions.
Could we ask the complainant whether she still believes that she's been harmed by this?
Sure.
Yes, as I mentioned in my statement, I believe that there was harm done with the withholding of these records. For clarity's sake, it was a Zoom meeting in December, and there was no open chat function, but the city was doing their public budget presentation, and residents that were on the call, anyone joining the call could submit via the question and answer function. And so I was just wanting to see what questions had been submitted, because they weren't visible to everyone on the Zoom. They're just visible to the people running the Zoom call. So that was my request. In my experience with Zoom calls, when you are recording a meeting, the whole transcript and anything that's typed into a chat or question and answer function is saved. So the first piece that I received from the city was the Zoom recording itself, which in my experience should have also come with any archiving of the chat or question and answer function. So yes, I believe there was harm done, because it's very clear that the city did have a record of the meeting, and so because they were recording the meeting and they had that record that they sent to me, there were also these other pieces that were missing. As the city just mentioned, that there were other open ways to receive public input. That was not my concern. I know how to submit input to the city about the budget process. I wanted to see the questions that other residents were asking in that Zoom meeting, which was the purpose of my FOIA request to the city and the basis of my complaint that I made.
But now you've seen those questions.
I have, yes.
And you still have an opportunity to provide input into the budget process.
Correct. Yes, but I think that what records were withheld knowingly, I think that this exposes, as the city mentioned, that there was a problem with how they're collecting information. I think that this was a very simple request that bloomed into a whole problem, and now we've had to sit here, over 2.5 hours just to get to this point in this meeting. for something that could have been very simple. So that's why I'm not wanting the IPIB to dismiss this, as you've done and have considered with other items today, but rather to investigate this further and perhaps not just make a recommendation to the city and then their process, but hold them accountable somehow for the failure to have done so.
So, I'm not sure that I know what we're talking about. So you have a Zoom meeting, and then there's a mechanism to what? Copy a document into the,
Well, as we were explained, and I can have Lisa talk to you a little bit, but when I knew there was a problem, it was when I was getting a different explanation from about 5 different people. So Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I mean, I personally know nothing about Zoom. I actually
I'm
have a
just
process
wondering-
I do, but I didn't know.
trying to think about how does this thing work. So-
Yeah, I found out later that there is a question and answer function on Zoom that the administrator can turn on. I didn't realize there was any such function until after this all happened. But and apparently it was turned on. Our IT department didn't realize it was turned on. It was turned on by the Public Information Office, but the Public Information Office didn't realize that it was recorded. So it's just, it's human error.
So does somebody have, if I'm trying to get something in there, I hold it up, or what do I
Oh,
do?
no, you would type into your computer, and then I believe it came up in front of the city manager, and then he would relay the.
So you send it as, okay.
Yeah, I actually attended the meeting I did this morning with Zoom. They had both a chat and a Q&A. And even though the director of the facilitator specifically said, please don't use chat, just use Q&A, people were using both of them. But I could click on it and see what other people were asking in real time. So I assume there's...
I wish I had known that there was a Q&A function from the very beginning. If I knew what questions to ask, we may have gotten to that determination sooner. But unfortunately, I didn't know what I didn't know.
And I want to be very clear here because this really strikes home with us. There is absolutely no evidence that any of this was done in any willful way to hold anything back from a citizen who has the right to have those documents. And I really find it upsetting that on behalf of Lisa, who does a wonderful job for the city, we have a good track record, and that somehow there was some willful action on any of our parts to withhold any documentation from Ms. Moritz.
Did someone on the line have a question, board member?
Yeah, actually, this is Monica, and I have worked with Zoom, and I consider myself somewhat tech savvy, and it's one of my least favorite meeting functions because I think it's terrible and it is hard to find different things in it. So I understand where the city is coming from, I understand where the complaint is coming from, and I think it's just one of those that unless you're an expert in Zoom, and I don't know anybody who is, I think it can be a difficult thing to remember where to pull each piece of information that you're trying to find. And that's just my experience with it.
Further questions or comments from board members?
I would move the recommendation that it be harmless, found to be harmless or dismissed. I mean, see, you could have sent them another copy. I don't understand why it was allowed to not be displayed. They couldn't find it, why they didn't display it. So I think the whole thing is just a matter of, what do I want to say? Harmless, it's just an error that occurred, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been known to make mistakes, especially with
Did you make a motion? You did, didn't you?
This is Joan, I would second.
Moved by Keith, seconded by Joan. All in favor of the dismissal order signify by saying aye.
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 Did you vote? Okay. Any opposed? The dismissal order is approved. Thank you, ladies, for your time. All right. We have a couple of matters withdrawn for the board's information. Pending complaints are listed there for the board. That brings us to committee reports.
Thank you.
Communication.
I don't think there's any report from communications.
Legislative.
I'm going to pass out to you all for your reading pleasure. Let's start with you guys on this side. Right. Just to look at these, we're not going to discuss them or anything in particular, but this is information purposes. But I'll give you an update. And tomorrow's the second funnel. I don't think what I thought all along was a pretty simple little 60 to 90 day filing deadline. It's not going to make it past. No. It was approved on February 2nd. It was calendar ready at that point in time. It was not put on the Senate calendar. I think about every 3 or 4 days I've communicated, I've sent requests as to what's going on here to the employee who does, the LSA guy who publishes the calendar for the Senate. I've sent it to the Senate, it's president of the Senate or the Senate Majority Leader who fixes what goes on the calendar. And I've sent it to Senator Cornier, I think that's how it's pronounced, who was the floor manager for this legislation. I got one response back, and it was, "I'll check on that." And so I'm hoping because these other two pieces of legislation could create new and more business for us, that probably that's the reason they want to see how well we can handle all of the new complaints we're going to get, and so that's why I didn't keep a copy. That's okay. I can get another. Anyway, the other two pieces of legislation that look like they're going to pass, and that's why I was going to give them to you all, is one is Senate File 2322. That has to do with the fees, and that has the language in new language that says it's not terribly helpful in terms of direction for us, except it does say that you can immediately request a review of the reasonableness of fees. So I think we could get some more interim complaints filed, because you can do it either through district court or through us, and we're obviously easier and cheaper. So that passed the Senate on February 23rd, 48-0. It passed the House Ways and Means on March 15th, and it's on the Ways and Means calendar. The other one is Senate File 513. That adds that new Section 22.7 sub 5A that goes to body camera and other evidence, video and audio evidence that's taken during certain types of incidents, police involvement, and where there's mental health or homelessness involved. So I can see where that makes those records confidential, so that's separate from 22.7 sub 5 police officers' investigative reports. It's the first page and a half that amends our chapter 22, and then the rest of that is a bunch of other chapter amendments that, like what they're supposed to do with that information and so forth. But that one passed the Senate on March 9th, 48-0. And the House Judiciary Committee recommended passage yesterday and immediately placed on the House calendar. So those two have made it past the second funnel, and as I say, there's certainly significant support for, bipartisan support for those. So those are for us to look at and think about what we're going to be doing in our next term. But we'll continue to monitor and see what happens with Senate File 409. I guess you'll talk about that when we get to this report. But that's where we are with the legislation.
Rules Committee.
Better than we've ever been.
You going to talk about rules? You're listed on the agenda.
Oh, they put my name on it?
Yeah.
Okay. You'll be defer to you. I think we'll have some rules that'll be coming before the board in April for you to review and talk about.
And one's going to be a rule drafted to deal with the delay in furnishing public records. I think we've kind of thought we were unable to take much enforcement action.
What was that?
A rule to deal with the timeliness of complying with public records requests. But if you look back at the Horsfield decision, it was clear back in 2013, they found a timeliness violation when it was like 600 and some records that it took a couple of months to cough up. So it's an attempt to do a rule that would give us a basis for enforcing the law better in terms of timeliness. And we'll have that on the agenda next month. Office status report.
Okay. Contacts and activity. You can tell just by how many cases were in subsection 6, all 7 of them, and how many are pending now. 15, most of which are brand new, filed within the last week. So it was a slow start, or maybe it was a slow end of February. And once the weather started getting warmer, we started getting more complaints. So we're keeping busy there. We have looked about new visitors were 86 or 85% of our web contacts for the month of February, and returning visitors were only 14.7. So we continue to have a lot of new people. On the Google report, we had 1,666,000 clicks on our in February on our web, and most open meetings had the most clicks. After that was what police and sheriff's records are releasable at 30, and Chapter 22 text version, just going to Chapter 22 on our web 17. Those are our top growing pages compared to the previous month. And top performing pages are public records. This is the general homepage and open meetings. So more information you probably need, but that's what's there.
Financial and budget condition, Brett?
Pardon me. The budget's progressed, or financials are fine. We're right on track. Saved a little bit of money the last couple of months on salaries.
Because Zach left?
Because Zach left for 2 months, but Logan keeps sucking away our hourly rate. So, but we're good. We're good on budget. On the appropriations side of things, I believe, Margaret, correct me if I'm wrong, subcommittee passed out a budget this week. We
I
thought,
couldn't find anything about it on there.
and we're
It's floating around.
a little word from Margaret. She heard that they were going to toss us a few pennies to help us cover some transition costs that we may have as Margaret retires, and we have some vacation to pay out. So we may get a little bit more than we requested, or that the governor proposed, but we'll wait and see how that comes.
They were so impressed with our presentation at the subcommittee, or the committee level, or subcommittee level, that they wanted to give us a little more money.
Or at least by one of us, they were impressed.
I guess they called me, didn't you?
I'm not sure which one that was.
My mother would think I would be this, but I didn't wish everybody a happy payback.
Yeah, got my green on.
office staffing, we kind of moved that up under chair comments.
Right, and presentations and trainings, we have
Oh, I
another
see that.
meeting at the end of this month, and it looks like this training is going to be conducted in 4 different areas of the state. It's going to be an all-day training, they're going to provide lunch. But the morning portion of that will be on just general public records laws and Chapter 22 and enforcement and so forth. And then they're going to, in the afternoon, they're going to have presentations and do discussions on record retention in the public record. Primarily police officers investigating reports. It's being put together by law enforcement, and they've got, I'm a member of a group along with Jessica Reynolds from the AG's office. She's, excuse me?
Whose meeting is it?
I don't remember his name.
Sponsor of the meeting?
It's I don't remember. I've got it in my office. To be honest, I'm one of many people that are listening in on these meetings. But we're going to have more information at the end, at our March 28th meeting. But it's one of the, I think it's one of the police officers groups that has, and they invited judicial, I think there's somebody from judicial coming as well, so we'll see.
Margaret will cautiously attend.
I'm going to be I guess, partly, I want to know what I'm supposed to be presenting on. That's the main reason. But they're going to do it in May, once a week for the first 4 weeks of May in various parts of the state.
I have an announcement to make about the next meeting location.
I hope it's going to be here.
It is.
Good. I didn't mean to skip the
No, that's it.
training, and we know that the training.
Yep.
The next meeting is.
Next meeting location is going to be back up here, and it looks like it's going to be up here for 2 or 3 more months. I think we're kind of working out making sure everybody has access, as long as we have an intern, that's helpful. But avian flu has bumped us out of the second floor agriculture committee room. So they said you may want to find another place for a few months. We're not sure.
Well, let me add as an editorial comment, I much prefer this meeting room than the one on the second floor.
It's, my only concern is the access issue.
Yeah.
Right.
And so
Those people found their way up here.
I guess it'll require a complaint filed with our board that they couldn't get access before we have to correct it as harmless error. But we'll attempt to do the best we can and continue to have it here.
We noticed the new carpet
Out there in the hallway?
in here.
Oh, is this new carpet?
Yeah, there's no tape.
There's no tape.
I think this was like a couple of years ago. You
Well,
wouldn't know
yeah,
because it was probably 2020.
News has reached the hinterlands.
Yeah, I can understand because we haven't had many meetings here since then. And
Excellent.
you'll also notice that the AJL section, they've got two actual courtrooms, they've got walls. So we can be more,
Loud.
rowdy in here now because it's harder to hear us. Not that they can't, it's just harder, so.
As you all leave, if you want to grab one of these carpet squares and transfer it to our office,
Right.
we will, as a committee, re-carpet our office.
Thank you.
A motion to adjourn?
Second.
Hey Julie, I wanted to ask a question after you were adjourned, so I don't want to, could the rules committee come up, work through another choice, the 4 choices? Because, as somebody who's on the outside, as much outside as I can be of the process, there's a lot of frustration around, I want to be able to tell someone, you did wrong, but I don't want to do a contested case. It does. I've heard that multiple times in last. Is that something the rules committee can do?
What, I don't know, what other choice would we contemplate?
I'm just trying to open, I hear frustration that I want something more than C, but I don't want to do D because there's no real benefit. It sounds like there's the desire to be more direct without having to do a case.
Maybe roll up the order and hit them with it? Is that what you're?
Something like that, yes. Yeah, literally. I'm just saying, this feels like there could be
free space in
I
that.
think there could be a finding of fault and violation without necessity of levying the fine.
Well, I think you need to be careful, you're not gonna have a finding without.
Then you gotta have a whole.
Yeah, we have to have a hearing, that's where we get stuck, is that probable causes of the
Have to
hearing.
give a vote to
you know?
adjourn. You just got your motion, you didn't vote.
We never
I
voted
think
to
we worked
adjourn.
out if we could
We
figure
had
out.
a motion and
We
a
used
second.
to have one, and then it was,
No votes.
Was it taken out of
You're back, sorry.
it was taken
I
out.
know that's probably my fault.
Yes, we'll note that in the minutes.
Please do.
Can we have a vote on adjourning?
But if somebody says,
Can we
All in
vote on
favor,
adjourning?
all in favor, just say all in favor.
All in favor?
aye,
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And remember, you
Thank you.
can't,
All right, I got
can't
410.
deliberate on things not.
Sorry.
I read it out.
I got
Somebody says, I
this new complaint they have.